Hi guys, and welcome to Relaxing History Time. Tonight we begin at the soft edge of day when the last light thins out and you feel the world slow its breathing. You stand inside an early American home as dusk presses gently against the windows. The air cools, the room shifts. You probably will not survive this if you expect cozy silence and instant comfort, because evenings here are earned, not granted. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like it, tell me where you are listening from and what time it is where you live right now. Now dim the lights and let the day loosen its grip as the story carries you forward. You feel dusk arrive before you see it. The light does not snap off. It thins, turns honey-coloured, then slips sideways across the room. Shadows lengthen and soften. Outside, the sounds change. Birds settle. Insects begin their careful tuning. Inside, bodies that have been moving since sunrise finally slow. Not stop, just slow enough to notice themselves. The hearth is already awake. It has been awake all day, but now it matters. Flames lick upward, steady and patient, and the firelight begins to replace the sun as the main storyteller in the room. It paints faces in warm strokes. It hides edges. It forgives clutter. You notice how the fire pulls everyone slightly closer, like a quiet invitation no one questions. This is not leisure in the modern sense. There is no clean break between work and rest. A widely accepted historical reality is that in early America, particularly in the 17th and 18th centuries, daylight structured daily life more than clocks did. When the sun lowered, tasks changed rather than ended. You feel that truth here. Hands keep moving. Feet shift. Someone stirs embers. Someone else adjusts a pot that's been sitting since afternoon. The smell of the room tells you the day is over. Wood smoke clings to everything. It is sweet and sharp at once. Beneath it, traces of supper linger. Salted meat, beans, maybe cornmeal. The scents mix and settle into the walls. You do not smell them as individual foods anymore. They blend into something familiar, something that says evening without using words. You notice the way people breathe now. Slower, deeper. The tension that lived in shoulders during the day begins to slide down the spine. There is relief here, but it is quiet. No one announces it. Relief arrives the way fatigue does, gradually, politely, almost shy. Firelight flickers across the floor and you become aware of the room itself. The space is smaller than modern rooms, lower ceilinged, closer. This closeness is not accidental. Houses were built to hold heat, not echo sound. The walls feel near enough to lean on. The ceiling feels low enough to keep secrets. A quirky detail slips into your awareness. In some households, people could tell time by how the shadows from the hearth fell across specific floorboards or wall pegs. It was not precise, but it was good enough. You smile at the thought of a room that knows the hour by memory rather than numbers. As the light fades, conversation begins to change. Voices lower without instruction. Words slow down. There is no rush now to be efficient. During the day, talk is clipped and functional. At dusk, it becomes rounder. Stories take longer to reach their point. Pauses stretch without discomfort. You sense that this moment matters. It's not dramatic, but it is important. Historians still argue whether these evening hours were the primary emotional centre of early American households or simply a practical necessity shaped by darkness and exhaustion. Standing here, you feel it might be both. Necessity can still carry meaning. The fire crackles and that sound becomes a kind of background language. It fills gaps. It makes silence feel intentional rather than empty. You realise how different this is from modern quiet. There is always something alive in the room, breathing, shifting, settling. Someone adds a log, sparks lift briefly then vanish. The action is casual, practiced. Fire is not a novelty here. It is a responsibility. Even now as the room softens, someone is watching it. Comfort and danger sit close together, separated by attention. You feel the temperature shift. The day's chill creeps in from the floor, from the walls, from the small gaps that let the outside world whisper through. The fire pushes back, but not completely. Evenings are about balance. Warmth here is gathered, not guaranteed. Your body responds without asking permission. Muscles relax, weight settles into heels, into benches, into whatever surface you claim. The rhythm of the room begins to guide you. No one checks a clock, no one announces what comes next. The evening knows its own order. Outside, dusk deepens into early night. Inside, faces glow amber and gold. The contrast sharpens your awareness. This room is an island of light in a much darker world. Beyond these walls, forests stretch, fields disappear, roads become guesses. Darkness is not symbolic. It is practical, physical, and very close. You hear a small sound, a sigh, a shift. Someone clears their throat as if preparing to speak, then decides not to. That decision matters. Evenings are when thoughts surface, but not all of them need words. Some are content to be felt and left alone. Another mainstream fact drifts through your mind, woven gently into the scene. In many early American communities, especially rural ones, evenings were one of the few times entire households gathered in the same space without immediate labor demands. That gathering shaped relationships more deeply than formal occasions ever could. The fire dips, then flares. Light moves across the room again. You notice how familiar this motion feels even centuries later. Something about watching flames seems to belong to you already, as if memory runs deeper than experience. You become aware of time stretching, not dragging, just opening. The pressure of the day releases its hold. The night does not rush you forward. It waits. It allows. As dusk finishes its quiet work, you realize the evening has fully arrived without announcing itself. There was no moment to point at and say now. It simply happened the way breathing slows when sleep approaches. And as you stand there, warmed by firelight and shared presence, you sense that this is where the story truly begins. Not with events, but with atmosphere. Not with action, but with the feeling of being held in a circle of light while the world beyond fades into shadow. The fire has quietly taken over the role of timekeeper now. You notice it without anyone pointing it out. No bells ring. No clock ticks loudly from a wall. Instead, the hearth does the counting. The way the flames rise and settle, the rate at which logs collapse inward. The soft reminder of embers dimming and being stirred again. Evening moves forward one crackle at a time. You feel how everyone orients themselves around this center, not just physically, but mentally. The fire tells you how long you can linger, how late conversation can stretch when bodies should begin to give in. It sets a pace that feels natural, almost biological. Long before pocket watches become common, this is how people know when night is truly arriving. A broadly accepted historical understanding is that in early America, especially before the late 18th century, accurate timekeeping was rare in ordinary households. Clocks existed, but they were expensive, fragile, and often unreliable. Even when a clock was present, it rarely ruled behavior the way modern timepieces do. You sense that truth here. No one glances at a dial, they glance at the fire. The flames shift, and with them the mood of the room. When the fire burns high, conversation feels open and alert. When it settles lower, voices soften. People lean back. You realize that the hearth does not just mark time, it shapes it. The evening is not divided into minutes, but into phases of warmth and glow. Someone adds a piece of wood, and the sound is familiar enough to go unnoticed. That action resets the room slightly. Light brightens, shadows retreat. It feels a bit like turning up a dimmer switch, though no one would think of it that way. The effect is emotional as much as visual. Energy lifts just a little. You notice how the fire's light moves across faces, never holding still long enough to freeze an expression. It softens sharp looks. It forgives tired eyes. In this light, people appear kinder, or at least less defined. Disagreements feel harder to sharpen. Silence feels safer. A quirky but well-documented detail slips into your awareness. Some families judged bedtime by how many times the hearth needed to be fed after supper. One feeding meant an early night. 2 meant conversation would stretch. 3 meant something unusual was happening. Maybe guests, maybe a story worth staying awake for. The fire remembers what the clock cannot. You feel yourself settling into that rhythm. Time loosens its grip, the pressure to measure evaporates. Instead of asking how late it is, you begin asking quieter questions. Are you warm enough? Are you tired yet? Is the fire still steady? These questions matter more here. Historians still debate whether this fire-based sense of time made evenings feel longer or shorter to people living them. Some suggest nights felt extended, rich with talk and reflection. Others argue fatigue compressed time, making evenings feel brief and fleeting. Standing here, you suspect it depended on the night, the weather, and the company. The fire snaps softly and sparks jump. Someone watches closely, adjusting a poker just enough to keep things safe. Fire is never fully trusted, no matter how familiar it becomes. That vigilance quietly shapes the evening. Someone is always responsible, even while resting. You feel how the room responds to this shared focus. Bodies turn slightly inward. Even those seated farther away angle themselves toward the hearth. It is a subtle choreography, learned without instruction. The fire is the center of gravity. Everything else arranges itself around it. Outside, darkness deepens. Inside, the fire grows more visually dominant. Its light fills corners that daylight ignored. You notice details you missed earlier. The texture of the wall, the wear on the bench, the shape of hands folded loosely in laps. The fire reveals while the night hides. Another mainstream fact drifts naturally into the moment. In many early American homes, the hearth served multiple purposes at once. It was the kitchen, the heater, the light source, and often the emotional heart of the household. Evenings made this especially clear as all those functions overlapped in a single glowing space. The soundscape changes too. Without daylight tasks, the room grows quieter, but it is not silent. The fire breathes, wood settles, someone shifts their weight, fabric rustles. These sounds replace the noise of work. They create a softer soundtrack, one that encourages stillness. You notice how conversation begins to follow the fire's lead. When the flames leap, laughter comes easier. When they sink, voices slow, stories stretch, thoughts wander. The fire does not demand attention, but it rewards it. A small but telling detail catches your mind. Ashes from previous nights often remain near the hearth, faint traces of evenings past. They mix together, indistinguishable from one another. Last night's fire blends with tonight's just as one evening blends into the next. Time here is layered, not segmented. You find yourself losing track of how long you have been standing or sitting. That loss feels intentional. The fire has absorbed the responsibility of counting. All you need to do is be present. This is not idleness. It is a different form of awareness. As the fire settles into a steady glow, you sense the evening reaching a comfortable middle. Not the beginning anymore, but not yet the slow slide towards sleep. This is the stretch where people linger, where talk deepens or fades without pressure. The hearth holds the moment quietly, patiently, as it has held countless evenings before this one. And without announcing it, it prepares everyone for what comes next, guiding the night forward one flicker at a time. The room carries supper with it long after the bowls are cleared. You notice that first, smell lingers more stubbornly than sound or light. Wood smoke clings to your hair and clothes. Beneath it, the memory of food settles into the air, thick and comforting. It is not unpleasant. It is grounding. Evening smells like nourishment here, not just eating, but having eaten. You breathe in slowly and catch layers. Salt from preserved meat, earthiness from beans, a faint sweetness from cornmeal or squash. Even when the dishes are scraped clean, the room remembers. The hearth holds onto those scents, warming them, reshaping them, letting them drift gently through the space. A commonly accepted historical detail fits easily into this moment. In early American households, especially outside cities, meals were often cooked and eaten in the same room where people spent their evenings. There was no separate dining space, no sharp division between kitchen and living area. Supper did not end so much as it faded into evening. You feel that fade happening now. Someone wipes a bowl with a piece of bread. Someone else stacks wooden plates or sets them aside on a shelf. The movements are unhurried. No one rushes to escape the table because the table has already dissolved back into the room. The fire takes over, again gently reheating the air. As it does, the smells shift. What was sharp softens. What was heavy becomes rounder. The room feels fuller, warmer in a way that goes beyond temperature. You notice how food has changed the mood. Bellies are settled, shoulders drop another inch. A quirky detail floats up through the haze. In some households, leftover cooking smells were thought to influence dreams. People believe strong odours could carry into sleep, shaping what the mind wandered through at night. Whether true or not, it makes you smile to imagine dreams seasoned with smoke and stew. Conversation slows into something less practical now. During the meal, talk stayed close to logistics. Who did what needs doing tomorrow. Now voices loosen. Someone mentions a memory. Someone else adds a detail that might not be accurate but feels right. No one corrects it. Precision matters less than connection. You notice the sound of chewing has disappeared, replaced by quieter rhythms. Breathing, shifting, the faint crackle of fat still sizzling on a pan left too close to the fire. These sounds blend into the evening without asking for attention. The smell of food also carries information about labour. You can tell what kind of day it was by what was cooked. A simple meal suggests exhaustion or scarcity. A richer one hints at planning, maybe a better harvest, maybe visitors expected. Tonight feels steady, not lavish, not bare, enough. Historians still argue whether shared evening meals were more about efficiency or emotional bonding in early American life. Some emphasize practicality. Fuel was precious. Cooking once made sense. Others suggest the ritual of eating together anchored households emotionally in a demanding world. Standing here surrounded by lingering smells and relaxed bodies, it feels difficult to separate the two. You notice how the firelight glints off utensils as they're set aside. Wood handles darkened by years of use. Metal dulled but dependable. These tools have stories baked into them just like the food did. They return to their places without ceremony, ready for tomorrow. The air grows heavier as warmth and scent mingle. It wraps around you gently like a blanket you did not realize was being pulled up. This is the kind of comfort that does not announce itself. It simply exists. Someone opens a small window or door for a moment, letting cool air slip in. The contrast sharpens everything. Smoke that thins, smells shift. Night air carries dampness, maybe grass, maybe distant water. Then the opening closes again and the room seals itself back into warmth. That brief exchange reminds you how fragile comfort is here. Without the fire, without the meal, without shared effort, the night would feel very different. Evenings by the hearth are not accidental pleasures. They are carefully built. You find your attention drifting to the way people sit now. Postures change after eating. Bodies recline slightly. Feet stretch forward. Hands rest more heavily in laps. There is a collective sigh that never fully escapes, but is felt all the same. Another mainstream fact settles into place. In many early American communities, supper was the largest meal of the day, timed to sustain people through the long evening and into the night. Breakfast and midday meals were lighter, quicker, shaped by work. Evening food mattered because night demanded endurance. You sense that endurance now, not as strain, but as readiness. The meal has prepared everyone to be awake a little longer, to talk, to mend, to simply exist together before sleep claims them. A faint smell of ash joins the mix as embers settle. It is subtle but familiar. You associate it with safety, with containment. Fire is under control. The night can be held at bay a little longer. The room feels complete in this moment. Nothing is missing, nothing is pressing. The smells of supper act like punctuation marking the end of one part of the day and the beginning of another. As conversation drifts and the fire continues its steady work, you realize that these lingering scents do more than please the senses. They anchor memory. Long after words fade, long after faces blur, the smell of evening meals by the hearth will remain tied forever to the feeling of being full warm and allowed to rest. And as that awareness settles, the night leans in closer, ready to offer the next quiet chapter of the evening. You notice the seating before you consciously think about it. There are no matching chairs, no tidy arrangement meant for symmetry. Instead, the room offers places rather than furniture. A long bench near the hearth, a low stool pulled close for warmth, a sturdy chest doubling as a seat. Even the floor becomes an option, softened with a folded blanket or a pile of woven mats. You choose a place without ceremony, guided by habit and heat. People sit where they always sit, that positions are remembered by the body. One person claims the spot closest to the fire, another prefers the edge where warmth is gentler. These choices are rarely discussed, but everyone knows them. Disrupting them would feel strange, like wearing someone else's shoes. This kind of seating reflects an everyday reality of early American homes. Furniture was often sparse, handmade, and expedited to serve more than one purpose. Benches held people in the evening and tools during the day. Chests stored clothing and offered a place to rest tired legs. Comfort existed, but it was practical rather than indulgent. You shift your weight and feel the texture beneath you. Wood polished smooth by years of use. Fabric worn thin but softened by repetition. Nothing here molds itself to your body, yet your body adapts anyway. You learn quickly how to sit so your back does not ache, how to angle your feet toward the fire just enough. The arrangement of bodies tells a quiet story. Elders tend to sit slightly closer to the warmth. Children gather at edges, ready to move, ready to fidget. Adults settle somewhere in between, balancing responsibility and rest. No one assigns these places. They emerge naturally, shaped by age, habit, and need. A small but telling domestic detail comes to mind. In some households, seating near the hearth rotated by season. Winter nights granted prize spots to those who felt the cold most sharply. Summer evenings loosened the arrangement, allowing bodies to spread and lean without chasing heat. The room rearranged itself with the weather. You notice how sitting changes conversation. When people stand, talk feels temporary. When they sit, words linger longer. The simple act of resting invites stories to unfold instead of rushing toward conclusions. Evening seating creates permission to stay. There is no expectation of stillness. People shift. Someone leans forward, elbows on knees. Someone else stretches their legs, boots scraping softly against the floor. These sounds do not interrupt anything. They are part of the rhythm, as familiar as the fire's crackle. Some historians suggest that the lack of rigid seating reflected a broader social flexibility within households, especially compared to later periods with formal parlours and assigned chairs. Others argue it was simply a matter of resources, not philosophy. Standing here watching bodies arrange themselves instinctively, it feels like both explanations coexist comfortably. You become aware of proximity. Sitting closer means sharing warmth, but also sharing breath, sound, and presence. Evenings by the hearth pull people into each other's orbit. Personal space shrinks, and with it the sense of separation. This closeness can soothe or irritate depending on the day. A lesser-known habit surfaces quietly. Some families kept a specific low stool near the hearth reserved for storytelling or reading aloud, passed down over generations. Sitting there was less about status and more about voice. Whoever occupied that spot became temporarily the centre of attention. Tonight no one claims that role outright. Conversation flows without a single anchor. Comments overlap gently, laughter rises and falls. Silence returns without awkwardness. Seating here supports that fluidity. No one faces forward like an audience. Everyone faces inward toward the shared centre. You feel the warmth strongest on one side of your body. The other side cools gradually, reminding you that comfort here is uneven. You adjust slightly, turning, scooting, negotiating with the environment. This constant low-level awareness keeps you present. There is no sinking into oblivion yet. The firelight paints the scene in moving shadows. A head leans forward, stretching its silhouette across the wall. A hand lifts momentarily, glowing before fading back into amber. These fleeting shapes make the room feel alive, like it is breathing along with the people inside it. Another everyday truth becomes clear. Evenings like this are not about perfect comfort, they are about shared endurance. Sitting together through the slow hours builds a sense of belonging that does not rely on ease. Discomfort is tolerated because company matters more. You listen as someone clears their throat and begins to speak, then pauses. The pauses are loud, no one rushes them, the seating arrangement close and informal creates patience. Words arrive when they are ready. There is a quiet hierarchy here, but it is soft. Those with age or authority tend to occupy certain spaces, yet the boundaries blur at night. Children curl near adults. Adults lean toward one another. The day's structure relaxes. As minutes pass, you feel your body settling into its chosen place. Muscles adjust. The bench becomes familiar. The floor no longer feels hard. The room accepts you and you accept it in return. Seating by the hearth is not just about where people sit. It is about how they stay. It allows the evening to stretch, to deepen, to hold everyone without asking too much. In this simple arrangement of benches, stools and floor, you sense the quiet architecture of togetherness. And as the fire continues its steady glow, the room holds everyone exactly where they need to be, ready for the small motions and gentle work that will fill the next stretch of the night. Your eyes drift to the hands first. They keep moving even now, long after the largest tasks of the day are finished. Fingers work almost on their own, guided by habit more than thought. A needle slips in and out of fabric. A small blade smooths a wooden edge. A thumb tests the tension of a cord, then adjusts it slightly. Evening allows the body to slow, but it does not demand stillness. This quiet motion feels natural here. Rest and work are not opposites. They overlap. The hearth gives enough light for small tasks and enough warmth to make sitting bearable. People do not announce what they are doing. They simply do it the way breathing continues when you stop paying attention to it. In many early American households, evening hours were commonly used for light domestic labor that required attention but not urgency. Mending clothing, repairing tools, twisting fibers, sorting seeds. These tasks fit the pace of firelight. They did not demand speed. They rewarded patience. You notice how the sound of work blends into the room. The soft rasp of thread through cloth. The dull tap of wood against wood. These noises do not interrupt conversation, they support it. Stories stretch between movements. Silence fills the gaps when no one feels like talking. There is something calming about watching hands work this way. You feel your own breathing adjust to match the rhythm. Slow, steady, even. The fire flickers and the hands respond without looking, shifting position to catch the light just right. A small domestic curiosity surfaces in your thoughts. Some households save their most tedious mending for evening because firelight hid imperfections. Stitches that looked uneven in daylight softened in shadow. The goal was durability, not beauty. Night forgave small flaws. You sense how knowledge moves through these motions. Children watch without being taught. They absorb technique by proximity. A knot tied a certain way. A seam reinforced where it wears fastest. Learning here does not come with lessons. It arrives quietly through repetition. Researchers have noted that this kind of evening work helped stretch scarce resources. Cloth was precious. Tools were hard to replace. Repairing rather than discarding was not a moral stance, it was survival. Yet over time that necessity shaped values reinforcing patience and care. Someone pauses their work to listen more closely to a story, hands resting in their lap. The pause feels intentional. When the story ends, the work resumes. Nothing is lost, the task waits. The evening is generous with time. You become aware of posture again. People lean forward slightly when working, drawn closer to the fire's glow. Shoulders hunch, then relax. Movements are economical. No one wastes energy. Fatigue is respected here, not fought. There is a sense of shared effort even when tasks differ. One person mends, another sharpens, another sorts. The variety creates a quiet harmony. No single action dominates the room. Together they form a gentle background pulse. Some historians question whether these evening tasks were experienced as restful or burdensome. Written accounts vary. Some describe comfort in familiar motions, others mention weariness that never fully lifted. Standing here, you feel both truths settle side by side. Comfort does not erase exhaustion, it makes it bearable. The fire shifts and someone adjusts their position, angling their work towards the light. Shadows deepen, then retreat. The hands adapt without complaint. This dance with firelight has been practiced countless times. A faint smell of singed fibre drifts up briefly, then fades. Someone has held cloth too close to the flame. There is a soft laugh, not alarm. Mistakes here are small and survivable. The evening allows them. You realise how different this feels from modern multitasking. There is no pressure to optimise, no sense of falling behind. Work happens because hands know how not, because time demands it. The task becomes almost meditative. As minutes pass, you feel the room grow quieter. Not empty, just settled. The sounds of mending and shaping blend more fully with the fire. Conversation thins into occasional comments, then pauses again. Hands slow. Someone finishes a small task and sets it aside. Another continues unbothered. The evening does not insist on uniformity. Each person moves at their own pace. You sense that these small acts do more than maintain clothing and tools. They maintain confidence. Knowing you can fix what breaks changes how the world feels. Evening by the hearth reinforces that knowledge, gently night after night. As the fire burns steadily and hands continue their quiet work, the room feels balanced. Productive without strain, restful without idleness. This is the rhythm the night prefers, and everyone without discussing it follows along. You notice the children before they notice themselves, slowing down. Their energy does not disappear all at once. It fades in layers. First, the sharp movements soften. Running turns into pacing. Pacing turns into leaning. Leaning becomes sitting close enough to feel the fire without thinking about it. Earlier, they filled the room with motion. Now they orbit the adults, drifting in and out of laps, perching on low stools, settling briefly before popping up again. Evening asks less of them than the day did, but it does not yet demand sleep. This is the in-between time, and they move through it in small waves. In many early American households, children stayed awake well into the evening, especially during colder months when the hearth was most valuable. Night did not immediately separate adults from children. Instead, everyone shared the same gradual descent into rest. You feel how natural that seems here. A child's head rests against an adult's side. Fingers trace patterns in worn fabric. Another child lies on the floor near the warmth, eyes half open, watching sparks drift upward. They are not told to be still. Stillness arrives on its own. You sense how the evening teaches patience without instruction. Children learn when to speak by watching pauses. They learn when to listen by noticing tone. No one gathers them for lessons. The room itself does the teaching. A small domestic detail floats gently into your awareness. Some families kept a dedicated bundle of scrap cloth or wool specifically for children to handle in the evenings. It kept hands busy and quieted restlessness. These objects were rarely mentioned in records, but they show up again and again in household inventories. The firelight plays across young faces, softening expressions, stretching shadows. A child yawns and tries to hide it, then gives up. Another rubs their eyes with fists that seem too small for the task. Sleep approaches unevenly like a tide that reaches different shores at different times. Observers of early American family life have noted that bedtime routines were far less rigid than modern ones. There were no set hours enforced by clocks. Instead, sleep followed fatigue. Children learn to recognize it in themselves by watching others. You notice how adults respond. There is no impatience. When a child fidgets or interrupts, correction is gentle or absent. Evening lowers expectations. The work of the day is done. What remains is presence. A curious habit surfaces in your thoughts. In some homes, children were allowed to stay awake longer, on nights when stories were told or songs shared even if the next day promised labour. The emotional nourishment of those moments was considered worth the slower morning. You feel that nourishment in the room now. Children listen even when they pretend not to. They absorb tone, cadence, humour. They learn how voices soften at night, how disagreements lose their edge, how laughter can be quiet. Someone begins a story and a child inches closer, drawn by sound more than content. Words matter less than rhythm. The voice becomes something like the fire, steady and reassuring. There is a moment when one child finally surrenders to sleep without ceremony. Their body slackens, breathing deepens, no announcement marks the change. An adult shifts slightly to support the weight. The room adjusts without comment. You sense how shared space makes this easy. There is no need to carry anyone far, no separate bedroom waiting at the end of a long hallway. Sleep arrives where warmth already lives. Some scholars remain divided on whether this closeness fostered stronger family bonds or simply reflected economic necessity. The evidence supports both interpretations. Standing here with a sleeping child leaning trustingly into the curve of an adult, it feels difficult to imagine one without the other. The fire dips and someone adds wood softly, careful not to wake those drifting off. The crackle is quieter now, as if the flames themselves understand the shift in mood. Children who remain awake grow calmer. Movements slow, voices drop. They begin to mirror the adults without realizing it. The room guides them gently toward rest. You notice how no one forces the moment. There is no sharp command to go to bed. Sleep is not a rule here, it is an outcome. A child whispers a question that does not need an answer. The question hangs in the air, then dissolves. The whisper itself was the point. The reassurance came from being heard, not from response. As more small bodies settle, the room feels heavier in a comforting way. The evening thickens. Time stretches again, unbothered by schedules. You feel the patience this requires. Letting children wind down takes longer than ordering them to stop, but the result is different. The night feels shared, not enforced. Eventually someone lifts a sleeping child, carefully moving toward a bed or pallet just beyond the fire's reach. The motion is slow and practiced. Another child remains eyes heavy but determined, savouring the last moments of wakefulness. You understand now that evenings by the hearth are not just about rest for adults. They are about teaching children how rest works. Not as a command, but as a natural rhythm tied to warmth, light and company. As the fire continues its quiet work and the room grows more hushed, the children's presence fades gradually into breathing and weight and stillness. The night accepts them gently, one by one, without hurry. The stories begin without anyone formally deciding to tell one. A sentence drifts into the room almost casually, something that starts with you. Remember when, or I once heard. The words land softly, testing the air. When no one interrupts, the sentence grows. Another follows. Before you realize it, the evening has shifted again. This is how news travels here long after daylight errands and face-to-face exchanges have ended. There are no printed pages waiting by lamplight, no headlines announcing importance. Instead, information arrives shaped by voice and memory. A neighbour's illness, a rumour from the next town, a change in prices, a birth, a death. These things move through the room slowly, carried by tone as much as content. You notice how listeners respond. Heads tilt, brows lift. Someone hums softly in acknowledgement. Reactions are subtle but attentive. The absence of paper makes listening matter more. If you miss a detail, it is gone. You cannot skim back. In many earlier American communities, especially rural ones, evenings were the primary time for exchanging information beyond the household. Travel was limited. Daylight was precious. The hearth became a clearinghouse for knowledge filtered through trust and familiarity. You feel how stories adapt to their audience. Details sharpen or blur depending on who is listening. Humour creeps in where tension might otherwise settle. Serious news is padded with context, softened by shared understanding. No one rushes to get to the point. The path matters. A small but intriguing habit comes to mind. Some families repeated important news over several evenings, not because they forgot, but because repetition allowed reflection. telling added something new, a different reaction, a remembered detail. Meaning accumulated gradually. You realise how different this feels from modern updates that arrive instantly and disappear just as fast. Here, information then goes. It sits with you, it mixes with the smell of smoke and the sound of the fire. It becomes part of the evening itself. Someone shares a story from years ago, something they witnessed as a child. Another person gently corrects a detail, not sharply but thoughtfully. The correction becomes part of the story rather than a challenge to it. Truth here is collaborative. Observers of early American social life have noted that storytelling served as both entertainment and education. Through these narratives, people learned local history, moral expectations, and practical lessons. You feel that dual purpose now woven seamlessly together. Laughter rises briefly, then fades. A joke lands modest but welcome. Humour here is not performative, it is relief. A way to release tension accumulated during long hours of labour. The fire seems to respond, flaring slightly as if amused. You notice how silence returns between stories without discomfort. No one scrambles to fill it. Silence here signals listening, not absence. It allows words to settle, to find their place. There is an intimacy to this exchange that feels protective. Stories told by firelight stay close. They do not travel far beyond the walls unless carried deliberately. This creates a sense of safety even when the news itself is unsettling. Some researchers remain uncertain whether this oral exchange reinforced conformity or encouraged critical thinking. Accounts suggest both occurred. Stories could warn against certain behaviours, but they also invited interpretation. Listeners were free to draw their own conclusions. You feel that freedom in the room. No one tells you what to think. Stories are offered, not imposed. Their power lies in repetition and resonance, not authority. A detail emerges that surprises you. In some households, children were allowed to listen to all stories, even those meant for adults. Shielding was rare. Instead, tone and framing softened difficult topics. Children learned early how the world worked, filtered through trusted voices. You sense how this shapes understanding. Fear is less sharp when wrapped in familiarity. Knowledge feels manageable when shared among people who care for one another. The fire crackles again, punctuating a pause. Someone clears their throat, then begins another story, this one quieter. It is about a mistake, something done wrong long ago. The telling is gentle, reflective. There is no shame here, only recognition. You realise that evenings by the hearth allow for this kind of honesty. The day demands competence. The night allows reflection. Stories become a way to revisit events without reliving their urgency. You catch yourself leaning in slightly, drawn by the cadence rather than the content. The voice telling the story is steady, unhurried. It carries authority not through volume but through calm. The room listens as one. Even hands that were busy earlier have slowed or stopped. Tension gathers naturally. No one announces this trouble. It happens because the story earns it. As the story winds down, it does not end with a lesson neatly tied. It fades into a pause, an unspoken invitation for thought. The fire fills the space, holding the moment open. You notice how these stories replace what daylight provided. Where the day offered tasks and outcomes, the evening offers meaning. It lets people revisit events from a distance, reshaping them gently. Over time, these shared narratives build a sense of continuity. The past is not abstract here. It is remembered, retold, adjusted. History lives in voices, not books. The room grows quieter again. Someone exhales slowly. Another shifts their seat. The evening does not rush onward, it lingers, allowing stories to echo softly before making space for what comes next. You sense that this exchange of words, memories, and listening has done its work. It has connected the household to the wider world without breaking the circle of warmth. As the fire settles back into a steady glow, you feel the evening deepen, ready to move from shared words into something quieter still. The hearth has carried the news. Now it holds the silence that follows. The silence arrives so gently that you barely notice it at first. It slips in between sentences, settles into the spaces where talk might have continued and stays. No one rushes to push it away. In this room, silence is not awkward. It is full. You listen more closely now, not for voices, but for everything else. The fire breathes. Embers shift and sigh. A log settles inward with a soft, tired sound. Someone's sleeve brushes against wood. Another person exhales slowly as if finally letting the day leave their body. These sounds knit together into something steady and reassuring. Evenings like this remind you that quiet does not mean empty. In early American homes, especially those crowded with family or neighbours, true solitude was rare. Silence became a shared experience rather than a private one. It belonged to everyone at once. You notice how people sit differently when words pause. Spines soften, hands rest more heavily. Eyes drift toward the fire without focusing on it. The body takes the lead, now guiding the mind toward rest. No one announces this change. It happens because the day has finally loosened its hold. A small domestic observation surfaces. Period diaries occasionally mention the comfort of sitting together without speaking, describing it as companionable stillness. The fact that writers noted it at all suggests it mattered, even if it seemed unremarkable at the time. The firelight deepens the silence. Shadows stretch and blur, removing sharp edges from the room. The absence of bright light makes it easier to stop performing, easier to simply exist. You feel less observed, even though you are not alone. You become aware of time passing without markers. No one checks anything. No one counts. The silence itself becomes the measure. When it grows long enough, someone may speak. Until then, it holds. There is comfort in knowing that you do not need to contribute. You're allowed to sit, to listen, to breathe. The day demanded productivity. The evening permits presence. Some interpretations of early household life emphasize constant activity, suggesting that silence would have been rare or uncomfortable. Other readings of personal letters and journals point to these quiet intervals as cherished moments. Sitting here, you sense why. Silence offers relief from decision-making. It gives the mind room to wander without pressure. A child stirs in their sleep nearby, shifting position with a small sigh. No one reacts. The sound blends into the room, another sign that rest has begun to take hold. The silence absorbs it easily. You notice how the fire becomes more mesmerizing in the absence of conversation. Flames fold and unfold. Colours shift from bright gold to deep orange. Watching requires no effort. It invites a kind of gentle focus that feels almost meditative. In this quiet thought surface that had no room during the day, a moment replays, a worry softens, a plan for tomorrow forms loosely without urgency. The silence does not push these thoughts away. It lets them come and go. Another subtle habit comes to mind. In some households, evening silence was considered a sign of harmony. Loudness at night suggested unrest or trouble. Quiet meant things were as they should be, at least for now. You feel that sense of Vormultanig here. The room is not tense, it is settled. Even disagreements mentioned earlier feel distant, already dulled by warmth and time. Someone shifts closer to the hearth, adjusting position to catch the last of the stronger heat. The movement is slow, careful not to break the mood. Silence encourages gentleness. You realize that this shared quiet also builds trust. Being silent together without discomfort means no one feels the need to prove themselves. Words are not required to justify belonging. Presence is enough. Outside, the night continues its work. Wind brushes against the walls. An owl calls faintly from somewhere beyond the light. These sounds drift in softly acknowledged, but not invited inside. The hearth remains the boundary. Some scholars suggest that such evenings helped regulate emotional life in a world with little privacy. Silence provided a buffer, a way to retreat inward while still remaining part of the group. The idea feels right as you sit here, thoughts moving quietly behind your eyes. You notice how breathing begins to synchronize. Not perfectly, but enough to feel shared. Inhale, Exhale, paddle. The rhythm steadies the room. The fire lowers slightly and the light dims with it. Shadows thicken. The silence grows heavier, but in a good way, like a blanket settling more firmly around shoulders. You feel sleep edging closer for some. Heads tilt. Eyelids flutter. Others remain awake, content to linger in this suspended moment. No one hurries the transition. The evening has its own pace. A final small sound breaks the quiet. Someone clears their throat, then decides not to speak after all. The silence closes gently behind the moment unbroken. You understand now that these pauses are not gaps between meaningful moments. They are meaningful in themselves. They allow the body and mind to recover from the constant demands of daylight. As the fire continues its patient glow and the room holds steady, the silence does not ask anything of you. It simply stays full and warm, making space for rest to arrive when it is ready. And in that shared stillness the evening deepens, carrying everyone forward, without words, preparing the room for the slower, softer hours still to come. Your eyes keep returning to the fire even when you tell yourself you're done watching it. It is not dramatic anymore. No sparks leap, no logs collapse. The flames have settled into a steady, almost modest dance. And yet you keep looking. The fire has become entertainment without asking to be. You realize how natural this feels. With no books open, no instrument sounding, no games laid out, the fire offers movement that never repeats itself. Each flicker is new. Each shift of colour feels intentional, even though you know it is not. Watching it requires nothing from you. It asks only that you stay. In many early American households, evenings offered little in the way of deliberate amusement. There were no scheduled diversions, no external distractions brought in to fill the hours. What existed was what was already there. The hearth filled that role quietly, providing something to look at, something to listen to, something to sit beside. You notice how others in the room do the same. Eyes drift toward the flames, then away, then back again. No one stares intensely. Attention comes and goes in gentle waves. The fire accommodates that rhythm easily. A small, easily overlooked detail surfaces. Children were often warned not to stare too long into the fire, not because it was dangerous, but because it was believed to invite daydreaming. The concern was not harm, but distraction. Even so, the warning was rarely enforced at night when drifting thoughts were welcome. You feel those thoughts yourself. They loosen their structure. Ideas blur at the edges. You stop trying to follow a single line of thinking. Instead, impressions float up and fade away, replaced by the next glow or shadow. The fire speaks in sounds too, a low murmur as wood shifts, a soft tick as sap escapes. These noises are subtle, but they hold your attention in the same way rain against a roof might. They do not demand interpretation. They simply exist. Some accounts of early domestic life note that people could sit for long stretches doing nothing more than watching the hearth. This was not considered idleness. It was understood as rest, as a necessary counterweight to days spent in constant motion. You feel that understanding settle into your body. Muscles that have been holding tension release it inch by inch. Your jaw unclenches. Your shoulders drop. The fire does not instruct you to relax. It makes relaxation feel inevitable. The light continues to shift across the room, changing how everything looks without moving anything at all. A face appears thoughtful in one moment, gentle in the next. Objects lose their sharp outlines. The room becomes less about details and more about atmosphere. There's something communal about this watching. Even when no one speaks, you sense shared attention. Everyone is oriented toward the same quiet focal point. It is not performance, it is presence. Interpretations vary on whether this habit of watching the fire was purely practical or deeply psychological. Some suggest it helped regulate mood and reduce stress. Others argue it was simply the only moving thing in a dark room. Sitting here, you suspect the distinction does not matter. The effect is real either way. You notice how time stretches again. Watching the fire does not move the evening forward, it suspends it. Minutes pass without leaving footprints. You're not aware of how long you've been sitting until you realize you no longer care. A faint warmth radiates outward, pulsing gently. You shift slightly to stay within it. The movement is unconscious. Your body knows where comfort lives and adjusts accordingly. Another small curiosity comes to mind. In some households, embers from the hearth were used for simple games, guessing which coal would fade first, watching patterns form in the ash. These were not games in the modern sense, more like shared noticing. The fire offered endless variation if you paid attention. You find yourself noticing patterns now, how a flame bends around a knot in the wood, how colours deepen near the base, how shadows move in slow looping arcs across the wall. The repetition is calming because it is never exact. The fire also carries memory. You have watched fires like this before, even if not in this place. Campfires, fireplaces, candles. Something about flame seems to bypass time, connecting moments across years and centuries without explanation. The room feels quieter now, though the fire has not changed its volume. What has changed is your sensitivity. Without conversation, every small sound feels closer, more detailed. You're not overstimulated. You're attentive. A person nearby shifts position, sighs softly, and settles again. The movement registers and then dissolves. The fire remains the anchor. You sense how this kind of evening entertainment requires no preparation and leaves no trace. When the fire eventually dies down, there will be no evidence of how long you watched it, no record of what you thought. The experience exists only in the moment. Some scholars point out that this kind of passive shared focus may have strengthened social bonds by allowing people to be together without needing to engage directly. You feel that truth here. Being near someone does not require interaction. Proximity is enough. The fire dips, then steadies. Someone reaches out to adjust a log, careful and unhurried. The motion briefly brightens the room, then everything returns to its prior state. The interruption feels minor, even welcome. You realize that watching the fire prepares you for sleep in a way nothing else quite does. It slows thought without stopping it. It holds attention lightly, allowing the mind to drift toward rest. As the evening continues, the fire remains at the center, offering motion without demand, warmth without insistence, light without glare. It is entertainment perfectly suited to a world that does not rush. You feel yourself leaning back, slightly content to let the flames do their quiet work. The day has already taken enough from you. Now the fire gives something back. And as you watch, unthinking and unhurried, the evening deepens further, carrying the room gently toward the slower hours that follow, one flicker at a time. Music arrives the same way stories did, without announcement and without intention to impress. Someone hums first, almost absent-mindedly, a low thread of sound that blends with the fire. It is not a performance, it is a habit. The tune wanders for a moment, then finds its footing. Another voice joins softly at first. Not in harmony, not quite in unison either, just alongside. The sound grows warmer, fuller, but never loud. No one straightens their posture. No one clears a space. The song belongs to the room, not to the person who started it. You notice how casual this feels. Singing here is not an event. It is an extension of breathing. Songs are remembered imperfectly versus slipping words bending to fit memory. No one corrects mistakes. The goal is not accuracy, it is presence. In early American households, especially before widespread access to printed music, songs were passed along by ear, ballads, hymns, works, songs, fragments learned from parents or neighbours. Evening was when these pieces surfaced most easily, when voices were unhurried and the fire made everyone feel brave enough to join in. You listen to the way the song moves. It does not demand attention. It drifts. Some people sing a line, then fall quiet again. Others never sing at all, content to listen. Participation is optional. The room accepts every level of involvement. A quietly surprising detail slips into your thoughts. Many households blended sacred and secular songs without much concern for boundaries. A hymn might follow a playful tune. A work song might carry a moral verse. Categories mattered less than familiarity. The firelight makes faces harder to read, and that helps. People sing without worrying how they look. Shadows hide self-consciousness. Voices sound safer in the dark. You feel the song change the air. Where stories invited listening, music invites surrender. Thoughts loosen further. The mind stops trying to follow meaning and settles into rhythm instead. Words become sound more than language. Some period accounts describe evenings when music stretched on until voices grew hoarse or laughter interrupted the tune. Other descriptions suggest shorter moments, a single song before quiet returned. The truth likely varied with mood, fatigue and company. Tonight feels gentle, unambitious. You notice how the fire responds, or at least seems to. Flames pulse slightly, shadows flicker in time. The illusion is comforting. It feels like the room is participating. A child stirs and hums along without fully waking voice, thin and sleepy. No one hushes them. The sound is welcomed, folded into the whole. This is not about polish. It's about belonging. You sense how these songs serve as emotional glue. Words carry shared values, shared humour, shared sorrow. Singing them together reinforces connection without requiring explanation. Everyone knows what this feels like, even if they cannot articulate why. A lesser mentioned habit comes to mind. Some families used evening songs as informal markers of time, certain tunes associated with early night, others with the final moments before sleep. The melody itself became a cue guiding bodies toward rest. The song winds down naturally. No final note is held. No applause follows. Voices simply trail off one by one until only the fire remains. The silence that follows feels different from before, warmer somehow, as if the sound left a residue behind. You notice you're breathing again slower than it was. The song has done its work. It has carried energy out of the room without leaving emptiness behind. Someone chuckles quietly, perhaps at a forgotten lyric or a shared memory. The song stirred. Another person sighs. The room settles back into stillness without effort. There is no sense of loss when the music ends. It was never meant to last. Its value lay in its brief presence, in the way it slipped into the evening and then let go. You feel how singing here is not about entertainment in the modern sense. It is about easing the transition from day to night. It bridges the gap between talking and silence, between wakefulness and rest. As the fire continues its steady glow and the room grows calmer, the absence of music does not feel empty. It feels complete. The song has settled into memory, ready to surface again on another night when the moment asks for it. For now, the evening moves on, quieter and softer, carrying everyone gently forward with the warmth of shared sound still humming faintly beneath the silence. You feel the season shaping the room even before anyone mentions it. The fire behaves differently now. In winter it is fed more carefully, watched more closely, respected with a seriousness that borders on reverence. In summer it becomes smaller, more restrained, allowed to glow rather than blaze. Tonight you sense the season in the way bodies gather. Cold evenings pull everyone inward. Chairs inch closer, feet angle toward the heat. Blankets appear without comment, draped over shoulders or shared across laps. The room tightens its circle, not out of obligation, but instinct. Warmth becomes a shared resource and proximity feels practical rather than intrusive. During warmer months, the same space loosens. Doors or shutters might stay open longer. People sit farther apart. Some choose the edge of the room where cooler air drifts in. The hearth still matters, but it no longer commands. Evening stretches outward instead of inward. Accounts from the period often note how dramatically daily routines shifted with the seasons. In early American homes, the calendar mattered less than temperature and light. Winter evenings lasted longer, not by the clock but by necessity. Darkness arrived earlier, and the hearth filled more hours. You feel that extension now. Winter evenings do not rush. There is nowhere else to go, little else to do once darkness settles in. The room becomes the world. Conversation slows because it can. Silence deepens because it is safe. A quietly overlooked habit surfaces in your thoughts. Some families save certain activities for the winter nights specifically because the season allowed time. Tool repair storytelling, even teaching children letters or numbers, often happened when fields lay dormant and evenings stretched wide. Summer evenings, by contrast, carried a different energy. People lingered outside longer. Chores led into twilight. The hearth still waited, but it was not always the first destination. Night came gently, and the fire took on a secondary role. You notice how clothing shifts with the seasons too. Heavier fabrics in winter invite stillness. Lighter garments in summer encourage movement. The body responds accordingly, settling or pacing as temperature allows. The firelight itself changes character. In winter it feels essential, almost protective. In summer it feels decorative, a soft centre rather than a shield. The same flames create different moods depending on what waits beyond the walls. Some interpretations of household life suggest that winter fostered deeper intimacy simply because people were confined together longer. Other readings argue that closeness also intensified tension. The truth likely lived somewhere in between, shaped by personality, resources, and circumstance. You sense that balance here. Warmth encourages closeness, but it also magnifies everything else. A kind word lands deeper, an irritation lingers longer. Evening does not erase emotions, it amplifies them gently. The sounds of the season press in from outside. Winter brings muffled, quiet snow, softening the whirlwind, testing the walls. Summer offers insects, distant voices, the occasional creak of trees shifting in warm air. These sounds seep into the room and change its texture. You listen differently depending on the time of year. Winter makes outside sounds feel distant and unreal. Summer invites them in, blurring the boundary between hearth and world. A small seasonal practice comes to mind. In colder months, some households placed heated stones near feet or under benches wrapped in cloth to hold warmth longer. It was a simple trick passed along quietly, rarely written down, but deeply appreciated. The room responds to these adjustments without fuss. Someone shifts a stone closer, someone else pulls a blanket tighter. These motions are small, but they shape the evening as surely as any story or song. You feel the patience winter requires. Long nights test endurance, but they also offer something rare. Time that does not need to be filled aggressively. Time that can stretch without guilt. Summer evenings carry a lighter patience. People know the night will be shorter, sleep will come quickly, the fire does not need to burn as long. The room remains open, transitional, ready to release everyone sooner. Period letters often describe winter evenings as reflective, even contemplative. Summer nights are mentioned less, perhaps because they felt less distinct from the day. Darkness mattered more when it arrived early and stayed. You notice how the season influences mood without anyone naming it. Winter invites introspection. Summer allows distraction. Both have their place. Both shape the way people relate to one another by the hearth. The fire responds accordingly. In winter, logs are added deliberately, building a bed of coals meant to last. In summer, smaller pieces suffice just enough to light faces and warm hands briefly. You sense how these seasonal rhythms become internalized. People learn when to linger and when to let go. Evening teaches this over years, not lessons. As the fire settles into a steady glow, you feel the season settle with it. The room adjusts bodies, finding their comfortable distance, conversation or silence arriving in the measure the night allows. This is not a single kind of evening repeated endlessly. It changes with the year, bending to weather and light, yet always returning to the same centre. The hearth remains steady as a memory, adapting without complaint. And as the night deepens, according to its season, you feel the room accept what this evening requires, holding everyone gently until the next quiet shift arrives. Even now, with bodies resting and voices quiet, work has not fully loosened its grip. It has simply changed shape. You notice it in the small movements that continue without discussion. Someone folds a cloth that was left crumpled after supper. Another checks the edge of a tool by touch alone, not sharpening it, just confirming it will be ready tomorrow. These are not tasks that demand urgency. They exist in the margins. Evenings, in early American homes, often carried this quiet continuation of labour. The largest efforts were finished with daylight, but smaller responsibilities drifted into night. These moments were not framed as work in the modern sense. They were part of keeping life running smoothly, small adjustments made when the body finally had room to breathe. You feel how different this is from daytime effort. Movement slow, attention softens. No one pushes to finish quickly. If something remains undone, it can wait. The fire allows this patience. It offers enough light to continue, but not enough to rush. Someone sets tomorrow's clothing closer to the warmth so it will be easier to put on in the morning. Another stacks kindling within reach. These gestures are preventative, thoughtful, meant to ease the next day before it begins. Evening labour looks forward rather than back. A lesser mentioned habit surfaces in your thoughts. In some households, people prepared small tasks specifically to be done at night because they required less concentration. Sorting beans, twisting thread, counting nails. The rhythm of the fire made these tasks feel almost soothing. You notice how conversation adapts around this. Words come and go between movements. Silence fills the spaces comfortably. No one stops what they're doing to listen, unless something truly needs attention. The room supports multitasking without pressure. Accounts from the period suggest that idleness was viewed with suspicion, especially during daylight. Evening blurred that boundary. Rest and usefulness could coexist without conflict. Sitting still was acceptable if it came after effort. You sense that cultural expectation here. Even in rest, people remain gently engaged. Not because they must, but because it feels natural. The body is accustomed to movement. Complete stillness would feel strange this early in the night. The fire shifts and someone responds automatically, adjusting a log. The motion barely interrupts their thoughts. This responsiveness becomes part of the background, a shared awareness that does not require words. Some interpretations of domestic life suggest that this ongoing evening activity reinforced a sense of purpose and self-sufficiency. Others note that it may have limited true rest. Both readings feel present here. The work is light, but it is still work. You feel the difference between obligation and choice. No one appears burdened by these small tasks. They are done because they make tomorrow easier, because hands know how, because the fire offers time. A small sound draws your attention. The soft scrape of a broom against the floor, not cleaning thoroughly, just gathering the day into a corner. The motion feels symbolic. Daylight is being put away. You notice how fatigue expresses itself now, not as collapse but as gentle emotion. Tasks take longer. Hands pause more often. Someone stops mid-action, then resumes with a faint smile, unbothered. There is a rhythm to this lingering work. Begin, pause, continue, stop. The evening does not demand completion. It allows drifting. Period writings occasionally mention how satisfying these moments felt, even when larger worries loomed. There was comfort in tending small things, in knowing that even when life felt uncertain, something could be set in order. You feel that satisfaction quietly settle into the room. The small tasks are not impressive. They are not remembered individually, but together they create a sense of readiness, a gentle confidence that tomorrow can be faced. The firelight grows dimmer as embers settle. Tasks slow further. Some are set aside unfinished to be picked up another night. No one remarks on it. The evening has its own limits. You sense that this is the threshold between doing and being. Work has not vanished, but it no longer defines the room. It recedes, making space for heavier quiet. Someone stretches rolling shoulders carefully. Another shifts position, leaning back more fully. The signals are subtle but clear. The night is moving on. As the last small motions fade and hands finally come to rest, the room feels lighter, as if it has exhaled. What needed doing has been done well enough. The fire continues to glow, holding what remains of the evening together. And with the work gently set aside, the household drifts closer to the deeper stillness waiting just ahead. As the evening settles deeper, you begin to notice how the boundaries that shape the day soften. During daylight, roles were clearer. Certain tasks belonged to certain people. Voices carried authority in familiar directions. Now by the hearth, those lines blur without anyone needing to name it. You see it in the way tools pass from hand to hand, A needle moves easily between fingers that would not have touched it at noon. A child offers an observation and is listened to. Someone who spoke little during the day now speaks more freely. The fire does not care who you were earlier. It warms everyone the same. Household life in early America often followed strict divisions when work demanded efficiency. Yet evening changed the tone. With urgency gone, cooperation replaced hierarchy. Tasks overlapped. Conversation crossed boundaries. The room felt more horizontal than vertical. You feel that shift now. The weight of instruction lifts. Advice turns into suggestion. Authority relaxes into familiarity. No one formally gives permission for this change. It happens because the environment invites it. A small but telling practice comes to mind. In some homes, children were allowed to handle tools or materials in the evening that were off limits during the day. Under watchful eyes and slower conditions, learning replaced enforcement. Night created space for Trieste. You notice how voices adjust, orders become questions, corrections soften, laughter slips into exchanges that might have been tense earlier. The firelight makes faces less rigid, and with that interactions follow. The arrangement of seating contributes to this shift. With everyone facing the same centre, no one stands above the others. Eye lines meet more easily, distance shortens. These physical changes quietly reshape social ones. Some readings of early household dynamics suggest that evenings offered rare moments of equality within families. Others caution that power never fully disappeared, only rested. Sitting here, you sense how both can be true at once. Authority loosens, but memory of it remains. You feel safer speaking now, even if you are not sure why. The room absorbs words differently. Mistakes feel less permanent. Opinions do not need defending as fiercely. The night offers cover. Someone tells a story that gently contradicts an earlier statement made during the day. No one bristles. The correction lands softly, framed as memory rather than challenge. The difference matters. You sense how these moments teach flexibility. People learn when firmness is needed and when it can be set aside. Evening models this without instruction. The fire becomes a quiet mediator. A lesser noticed habit surfaces. Some families intentionally delayed serious discussions until evening, believing that tiredness softened tempers. Whether effective or not, the belief itself reveals how people understood the emotional quality of night. You feel that emotional quality now? Everything is slightly slower, slightly gentler. Even disagreements, when they appear like sharp edges, they dissolve into pauses or quiet jokes. Children watch this closely, he's saying. They learn not just rules but timing. They see when to assert themselves and when to wait. They absorb the rhythm of conversation as much as its content. The room feels balanced, not because everyone agrees, but because no one feels rushed to conclude. Evening removes the need for resolution. Issues can remain open without causing discomfort. You notice how often people lean toward one another now. Physical closeness mirrors emotional ease. A shoulder brushes another without apology. A shared blanket shifts to accommodate more than one body. The firelight continues to soften edges, literal and figurative. Shadows blur distinction. Expressions become harder to read, and that ambiguity creates space for grace. Some observers of domestic life have pointed out that these blurred roles may have strengthened family cohesion over time. Others argue they simply reflected fatigue. Sitting here, you feel how fatigue and connection can exist together, each amplifying the other. As the night deepens, the daytime structure feels farther away. It will return, of course. Morning will bring clearer lines again. But for now, the evening belongs to a different arrangement, one shaped by warmth rather than duty. You sense the relief this offers. Being allowed to step slightly outside your role even briefly lightens the mind. The hearth becomes a place where identity loosens just enough to breathe. Conversation slows again, words thin out. The earliest sense of equality settles into quiet understanding. No one needs to prove anything here. As the fire glows steadily and the room rests in this softened state, you feel the evening, carrying everyone forward, rolls gently folded away until morning replaced by simple presence and shared warmth. You sense the change as soon as someone from outside crosses the threshold. The room reacts before anyone speaks. Chairs shift, backs straighten slightly. The fire feels brighter as if acknowledging the new presence. An evening with guests carries a different weight even when the visit is expected. Visitors do not arrive lightly at this hour. Travelling after dark is inconvenient and sometimes risky, so anyone stepping into the glow of the hearth now has a reason. News, necessity, companionship. Whatever brought them here, their arrival reshapes the evening. In early American communities, hospitality was not optional. It was a shared expectation reinforced by distance weather and limited alternatives. Turning someone away at night was rare not out of sentiment, but because everyone understood how vulnerable the dark could be. You notice how the room adapts instantly. Someone makes space without being asked. A stool appears where there was none. A cup is offered. These gestures are practiced, almost automatic, learned through repetition rather than instruction. Conversation adjusts too. Topics widen. Stories are retold for new ears. Some details are softened. Others are emphasized. The presence of a guest brings a subtle awareness of audience back into the room. A quietly telling detail comes to mind. In some households, the best seat by the fire was reserved for visitors regardless of age or status. Warmth became a language of welcome. Comfort spoke before words did. You feel how energy lifts slightly. Fatigue recedes just enough to make room for engagement. Even those who are close to sleep rouse themselves, curious about what this arrival might bring. At the same time, a gentle formality settles in. Voices grow a little more careful. Humour becomes safer. Disagreements retreat. The evening does not lose its warmth, but it gains structure. Different accounts paint varying pictures of how guests altered household dynamics. Some suggest visits brought excitement and relief from routine. Others describe them as obligations layered onto already long days. Standing here, you feel both responses coexisting. Welcome does not cancel weariness. It sits beside it. The fire is tended more attentively now. Someone adds wood sooner than necessary. Light and heat are maintained deliberately. The hearth becomes a stage of sorts, though no one would call it that. You notice how guests position themselves. They sit slightly upright, attentive but cautious. They read the room matching tone and pace. Hosts do the same, balancing openness with boundaries. A small domestic habit surfaces. In many homes, special food or drink was quietly set aside for visitors even if the household itself had already eaten. Offering something warm mattered more than abundance. The gesture carried meaning. The sounds of the room change again. Laughter becomes more likely. Silence shortens. The evening stretches in response to the added presence, making space for exchange. Children watch closely. Guests offer novelty stories from beyond the household. At the same time, children learn restraint sensing when to listen rather than interrupt. The visit becomes a lesson without explanation. You feel how the room holds this balance. Hospitality is extended without surrendering comfort. Guests are welcomed into the circle of light, but the circle remains intact. As time passes, formality slowly fades. A guest relaxes, leaning closer to the fire. Voices overlap more freely. The distinction between host and visitor softens, replaced by shared warmth. Eventually, the purpose of the visit reveals itself. News is shared. A request is made. A story reaches its end. The evening absorbs it all without rush. When the guest prepares to leave or settle in for the night, the room adjusts once more. Goodbyes are unhurried. Directions are repeated carefully. Safety is considered. You sense how these visits reinforce connection beyond the walls. Evenings by the hearth do not isolate households. They link them one visitor at a time, weaving a network of shared nights and mutual care. As the door closes or bedding is arranged, the room exhales. The fire resumes its quieter rhythm. The household returns to itself, changed just slightly by the exchange. The evening moves on, carrying the memory of the visit with it, folding hospitality back into warmth and shadow as the night continues its slow, steady work. The shift towards reflection happens almost without sound. Conversation turns inward, words growing fewer but heavier. Someone mentions a verse remembered from childhood. Another nods already knowing where it will lead. The hearth does not change, but the tone does. Evenings often carried space for faith in early American homes, though not always in formal ways. Prayer might surface quietly, woven into talk rather than announced. A line from scripture spoken from memory. A moment of thanks offered without ceremony. Religion here feels lived rather than staged. You sense how natural this feels. The day demanded action. The night allows meaning. Firelight softens edges, making it easier to speak about things that feel too large for daylight. Belief slips into the room the way warmth does, gradually and without insistence. In many households, evening prayer marked a transition rather than a conclusion. It was not about ending the day so much as steadying it. Words spoken by the hearth carried forward, meant to linger through sleep and into morning. You notice how posture changes. Heads bow slightly, not always in unison. Hands fold or rest more deliberately. Even those who do not speak fall into the same rhythm. Participation here is quiet and assumed, not enforced. A small but telling habit surfaces. Some families rotated who led evening prayer regardless of age or gender. The act was less about authority and more about voice. Speaking the words aloud mattered as much as hearing them. You feel how prayer and reflection create a pause deeper than silence alone. It asks the mind to settle on something steady. Gratitude, hope, endurance. Themes that fit naturally with the glow of the fire and the closeness of bodies. Accounts from the period suggest that evening was the most common time for shared religious practice within the home. Morning brought haste, midday brought work, night offered the rare luxury of attention. Yet not every household practiced faith the same way. Some kept prayer brief and habitual. Others allowed discussion, questions, even doubt. The hearth made room for both holding belief and uncertainty side by side. You sense how these moments shaped emotional life. Worries were acknowledged without being solved. Losses were named without opening wounds. The act of speaking aloud transformed private weight into shared awareness. A child asks a question simple and direct. No one rushes to answer. The pause itself becomes part of the response. Sometimes the question matters more than the explanation. The firelight flickers across faces now serious, now softened by familiarity. Reflection here is not solemn in the modern sense. It is woven into everyday life, grounded in shared experience rather than abstraction. You notice how prayer blends into conversation rather than interrupting it. A story ends and reflection follows naturally. No sharp boundary divides sacred from ordinary. Both live comfortably in the same space. Some observers have noted that this integration made belief feel less distant, less formal. Others suggest it reinforced social expectations quietly. Sitting here, you feel how belief becomes atmosphere rather than instruction. The words spoken by the hearth are not meant to persuade, they are meant to steady, to remind everyone of continuity beyond the day's demands. As reflection winds down, there is no dramatic close. No final amen shouted into the room. Words fade, silence returns. The fire resumes its gentle soundscape. You feel lighter, not because answers were given, but because the act of reflection allowed burdens to loosen. The night accepts what remains unsolved. The room settles again into quiet presence. Some eyes close briefly, not yet asleep, just resting. Others remain open, thoughtful, calm. As the evening moves forward, the sense of shared meaning lingers, carried quietly alongside warmth and shadow. The hearth holds it all, faith and doubt alike, as the night deepens further. Laughter surfaces when you least expect it. Not the sharp kind that breaks a room open, but something softer, warmer, almost surprised to exist. A comment lands sideways. A memory is recalled with just enough exaggeration to make it funny. Someone teases another gently, the way people only do when they feel safe. You notice how humour changes at night. During the day, jokes are brief, practical, sometimes edged with impatience. Now they stretch out. Timing matters more than punchlines. Pauses become part of the joke. A raised eyebrow can do as much work as a sentence. Evenings by the hearth allow this kind of humour to surface because the stakes are lower. No one is racing daylight. No one is measuring productivity. The fire creates a pocket where laughter does not feel like a distraction but like release. You feel how teasing works here. It is rarely cruel. It relies on familiarity, on knowing where the line lives. A habit is gently mocked. A past mistake is recalled without shame. The goal is not dominance, but connection. Some households were known for sharp wit. Others preferred quiet amusement. Letters and recollections from the period suggest enormous variation shaped by temperament as much as tradition. Humour was not prescribed. It emerged where it could. A small, easily missed custom comes to mind. In some families, playful arguments were deliberately saved for the evening when tempers were less likely to flare. Daylight disagreements could turn tense. Night softened them, allowing humour to step in where logic had failed. You hear one of these gentle debates unfold now. Someone insists on a detail being remembered incorrectly. Another counters with confidence. The exchange circles without resolution, growing more amusing with each turn. No one needs to win. The point is the shared moment. The fire responds with a soft crackle, almost like punctuation. Laughter ripples briefly, then fades into smiles and sighs. The room absorbs it easily. You notice how humour makes bodies lighter. Shoulders lift, then relax. Breathing deepens. Even those who do not laugh out loud soften in posture. The effect spreads quietly. There is something revealing about what people find funny at night. The humour is rarely abstract. It is rooted in daily life. Mud-tracked indoors. A stubborn animal. A tool that refuses to cooperate. These are shared frustrations transformed into something manageable through laughter. Some thinkers who have studied domestic life suggest that humour acted as a pressure valve in environments with few outlets. Others argue it simply reflected personality rather than necessity. Sitting here, you feel how laughter eases something real regardless of why it exists. A child attempts a joke, delivering it with earnest seriousness. The timing is off. The punchline arrives too soon. Laughter still follows, generous and encouraging. The attempt matters more than success. You sense how evenings teach social nuance. Humour becomes a way to learn boundaries without confrontation. A joke that falls flat is noted, not punished. A successful tease becomes part of shared language. The firelight makes faces harder to read, which helps. Embarrassment slips away more easily when expressions blur. Laughter feels safer in shadow. You notice that humour rarely lasts long. It comes in waves, then recedes. The room does not cling to it. After a laugh, silence returns, naturally unforced. The two coexist without conflict. A quieter kind of amusement appears too. A knowing look. A smirk exchanged between two people who share a memory no one else needs to hear. Evening allows private humour within shared space. Some accounts hint that joking at night was sometimes frowned upon in stricter households, especially when it drifted too close to irreverence. Other households embraced it fully. The differences speak less to rules and more to comfort levels. You feel the comfort here now. Laughter does not threaten order. It reinforces it, reminding everyone that they belong. The teasing fades into reflection without a sharp edge. A joke becomes a story becomes silence. The transitions are smooth, guided by tone rather than decision. You notice how the fire settles again, flames lurching slightly. The energy of laughter has passed, leaving warmth behind. The room feels calmer for it. Someone exhales slowly the way you do after a good laugh. The sound is contented. Muscles release another notch of tension they had been holding without realizing it. You sense how humour at night is different from humour in daylight. It is not about impressing or performing, it's about acknowledging the absurdity of living, of enduring, of doing the same hard things day after day. The hearth holds these moments gently, not amplifying them, not diminishing them. It lets laughter arrive and leave without consequence. As the evening continues, humour becomes less frequent, but its effect lingers. The room feels more open, more forgiving. Words land more softly. Silence feels friendlier. You understand now that these small laughs are not interruptions to rest, they are part of it. They help the mind set down its armour, preparing it for sleep. The fire glows steadily, shadows deepening. The last echoes of laughter dissolve into quiet breathing and shifting weight. The night moves on, carrying with it the memory of shared amusement tucked gently into the warmth of the room. You become aware of the light again, not because it has changed suddenly, but because it feels more precious now. The fire is lower. Candles, if there are any, burn shorter and quieter. Shadows claim more of the room. Darkness waits patiently just beyond the circle of glow. Light in early American evenings was never taken for granted. It was managed, conserved, negotiated. Every flame represented effort, fuel, and attention. As night deepened, illumination became something to ration rather than enjoy freely. You feel that awareness shaping behaviour. Movement slow. Hands pause longer between actions. People shift closer together, not just for warmth, but to share what light remains. The room contracts, gently pulling inward. Someone adjusts a candle wick, trimming it carefully so it burns clean. Another shields a flame briefly as a door opens and closes. These gestures are small, but they carry meaning. Light is fragile here. It requires care. A quietly revealing habit surfaces in your thoughts. Many households planned evening tasks around how much light they expected to have. Fine mending waited for brighter hours. Rough work belonged to the edge of night. The fire set limits and people learn to respect them. You notice how eyes adapt. Faces tilt toward glow. Features soften as details fade. The world becomes simpler, reduced to shapes and movement. This reduction feels calming rather than alarming. There is less to process. Some observers of domestic life have suggested that limited light helped regulate sleep naturally. Others point out that people simply adjusted because they had no alternative. Sitting here, you feel how the dimness invites rest without forcing it. Conversation grows quieter, not because there is nothing to say, but because speaking requires more effort now. Words must travel further through shadow, silence becomes efficient. You listen to the fire's sound more closely. Without bright light, hearing sharpens. The smallest crackle registers. The settling of ash feels louder. The room seems more intimate, as if the walls have leaned in. A small, easily missed detail comes to mind. In some homes, a single candle was kept burning, even after others were extinguished, placed near the hearth so its flame could be protected. It served as a bridge between firelight and darkness, easing the transition. You feel that easing now. The room does not drop into darkness. It drifts. Light thins, gradually giving bodies and minds time to adjust. People begin to choose where to sit based on sight rather than comfort. Those who need to see lean closer. Others content to listen or rest, let shadow take them. The room accommodates both without comment. There is a quiet discipline to this moment. No one wastes light. No one demands brightness. The acceptance feels learned, practiced over years. Some interpretations of early evening routines emphasize how darkness limited activity. Others highlight how people found ways to work within it. Both feel present here. Limitation and adaptation coexist comfortably. You notice how memory steps in when vision fades. Familiar objects no longer need to be seen. Hands find their way without looking. The room is known by feel and sound as much as sight. The fire dips again and someone considers adding wood, then decides against it. Not yet. The calculation is instinctive. How much night remains? How much fuel? How much warmth is needed? These decisions happen quietly without discussion. You sense how light influences emotion. Dimness softens urgency. It lowers expectations. It gives permission to stop striving. In shadow, effort feels unnecessary. A child murmurs something in their sleep. The sound is gentle, almost lost in the darkness. No one moves. The room holds it. The remaining light paints everything in amber and brown. Colours lose their names, edges blur. The world feels older somehow, closer to something basic and familiar. You realise that this careful handling of light teaches patience. You cannot rush night away or push it back. You move with it, adjusting pace and attention as it deepens. The fire continues to glow, but it no longer dominates. It becomes one presence among others. Darkness shares the room now not as an intruder but as a companion. As the evening slips further toward night, light grows quieter, less demanding. The room responds in kind voices, fading movements showing thoughts growing simmer. You feel yourself surrendering to the dimness without fear. The hearth has guided you here gently, step by step, showing you that less light does not mean less safety. And as shadows thicken and the last flames flicker steadily, the evening prepares to move into its final quieter phases, carried forward by the careful balance between glow and dark. You hear them before you see them move, a soft shuffle against the floor, a quiet breath that does not match the rhythm of the people in the room. Animals have settled closer now, drawn by warmth and routine as naturally as anyone else. Their presence feels ordinary, not intrusive. In many early American homes, especially outside towns, animals shared living space during the cold months. Not out of sentiment, but necessity. Heat travelled both ways. What kept them alive helped keep everyone else alive too. The evening hearth became a shared resource across species. You notice a dog stretched near the fire body, curved just enough to catch warmth without blocking it. An ear twitches, an eye opens briefly then closes again. The animal knows this hour. Night brings rest. A cat moves silently along the edge of the room, stepping with careful familiarity. It pauses, judging distance, then curls near a bench where heat pools softly. No one shoos it away. Its presence is expected. There is a faint smell beneath the smoke now. Fur, hay, something earthy and alive. It blends into the room the same way supper did earlier. You register it without judgment. This is part of the evening, not a disruption. A lesser mentioned detail comes to mind. In some households, livestock such as goats or sheep were brought indoors during the extreme cold, penned near the hearth or along a wall. The arrangement was temporary but common enough to be noted in personal accounts. Warmth mattered more than comfort. You feel how animals change the atmosphere. The room feels fuller, warmer in a way fire alone cannot manage. Bodies generate heat quietly, steadily. The effect is subtle but real. People adjust without comment. A foot moves to avoid a sleeping dog. A hand rests briefly on a warm back when passing. These gestures are casual practiced. Coexistence is routine here. You notice how animals respond to the evening too. Movements slow, sounds soften. The dog sighs deeply at a sound of complete ease. The cat kneads fabric once, then stills. They follow the same rhythm as the people, guided by light and warmth. Some observers of early domestic life have pointed out that sharing space with animals likely affected hygiene and comfort. Others note that people adapted quickly, prioritizing survival over separation. Sitting here, you sense how normalized this closeness feels. It does not register as compromise. It feels practical. The firelight flickers across fur and feathers, adding texture to the shadows. An animal shifts, casting a shape that blends with human silhouettes. The distinction between who belongs where softens. A child stirs and reaches out instinctively, fingers brushing a familiar shape. The contact is brief and reassuring. No words are needed. The presence of animals grounds the room, reminding everyone of shared vulnerability. You listen to the quiet sounds they make. Breathing, a soft scratch, the faint rustle of straw. These noises fold into the fire's murmur, adding another layer to the evening soundscape. There is comfort in knowing that everyone here, human and animal alike, has found a place. The hearth has drawn them together without discrimination. Warmth erases hierarchy. You sense how this closeness reinforces routine. Animals expect to be here. People expect them to be here. The predictability itself becomes comforting. As the night deepens, the animals grow heavier with sleep. Their stillness spreads. The room feels anchored, weighted gently towards rest. You realize how different this feels from modern separations. There is no boundary here between living and sheltering. The evening by the hearth gathers all life present and holds it. The fire continues its steady glow, illuminating fur fabric and skin alike. Shadows deepen, but nothing feels hidden. Everything that belongs is already inside. As the animals settle fully and breathing across the room synchronizes the evening, takes on a deeper quiet. The hearth has done its work again, not just warming bodies, but drawing them into a shared unspoken understanding of safety. The night moves forward softly, carried on warm breath and glowing embers, with every living thing in the room held just close enough to sleep. You feel the weather before you think about it. A low whistle slips through the cracks in the walls. The fire leans slightly, responding to a pressure you cannot see. Outside, the night presses closer, testing the edges of the house the way water tests stone. Wind has a voice here. It does not roar unless it means to. Most of the time, it murmurs, slides along wood-fine seams that daylight never noticed. You hear it circle, pause, then move on. The sound makes the room feel smaller and safer by contrast. In homes like this, the evening was never sealed off from the world outside. Walls slowed weather, but did not silence it. Rain announced itself long before it touched the roof. Snow changed how sound travelled, turning the world hushed and heavy. People learn to read these cues instinctively. You notice how the room responds. Someone adds wood without comment, not because the fire is low, but because the air feels sharper. Another person shifts a bench, slightly blocking a draft they have memorized over years of nights just like this one. A quietly practical habit comes to mind. Many households stuffed cloth paper or even dried plants into cracks during the coldest months, adjusting them nightly as weather changed. These were temporary solutions, moved and remade as needed, shaped by the night rather than the calendar. The fire pops softly, throwing a brief spark. Outside, something rattles, maybe a loose shutter or a branch brushing the wall. The sounds answer each other inside and out like a conversation carried through wood and air. You feel how weather sharpens awareness. On calm nights, thoughts wander easily. When wind or rain presses in, attention tightens. People listen more closely. Silence becomes alert rather than drifting. Some accounts from the period suggest that harsh weather nights pulled families closer together, both physically and emotionally. Others hint that storms heightened anxiety, especially when resources were thin. Sitting here, you feel both responses layered together. Comfort and concern share the same space. Rain begins light at first. You hear it find the roof, then settle into a steady rhythm. The sound wraps around the house, steady and patient. Inside, breathing slows to match it. The fire glows brighter against the dark windows now. Glass, if present at all, reflects flickering light back into the room, doubling the warmth visually if not physically. The world beyond becomes abstract, reduced to sound and pressure. A small domestic detail surfaces. Some families kept extra water or tools near the hearth on stormy nights just in case. Preparedness lived quietly alongside rest, never announced, always present. You notice how conversation shifts when weather speaks loudly. Words grow fewer. Listening takes over. The storm becomes the story told without language. Children who are still awake ask questions in whispers. Is it far away? Will it last? Answers come softly confident, even when uncertain. Reassurance matters more than accuracy in moments like this. The house creaks slightly, settling into itself. The sound is familiar enough to be ignored. Every structure has its own language learned over time. You know which noises mean nothing and which deserve attention. Outside, the wind rises briefly, then eases. Inside, shoulders relax. Someone exhales slowly as if they'd been holding their breath without realizing it. You feel the contrast sharpen. The night outside feels wide and restless. The room feels contained and warm. The difference is comforting, but it also reminds you how thin the boundary really is. Some observers have wondered whether constant exposure to weather sounds made people more resilient or simply more accustomed. Sitting here, you sense how familiarity reduces fear. Knowing what a storm sounds like helps you trust the walls around you. The rain settles into a gentler pattern. Drops slow, gaps appear. The sound becomes background again, no longer demanding attention. Inside, the fire resumes its quiet dominance. The room reclaims its focus. Weather remains present, but it no longer leads. You notice how the night feels earned now. Having listened to the wind and rain, having adjusted and waited, rest feels deeper. The house has passed a small test, and so has everyone inside it. As the storm drifts onward or fades entirely, the room holds its warmth carefully. The hearth glows steady and patient, offering the same reassurance it always has. The evening moves forward again, shaped briefly by weather, then released. The outside world can press and whisper and knock, but for now it stays beyond the walls. Inside, with the fire steady and bodies close, the night settles back into quiet, carrying the sense of shelter with it and preparing the room for the next slow step toward rest. You notice the moment when the tools are finally put away, not because anyone announces it, but because the room exhales. Something subtle shifts. A hammer that had rested nearby is lifted and returned to its hook. A knife is wiped once more and slid into its familiar place. The actions are unhurried, almost ceremonial, even if no one would call them that. Stopping work is its own kind of work here. Tools are not dropped, they are settled. Each object has a place it expects to return to, and honouring that expectation feels important. Tomorrow depends on it. Order at night makes morning lighter. In households like this, tools were extensions of the body. They were handled daily, relied upon, maintained with care. Setting them aside properly was not about neatness. It was about respect for effort already spent and effort yet to come. You watch how hands linger for a moment before letting go. Fingers test a handle, a blade, a worn edge. There is a quiet check for damage, for readiness. Nothing dramatic, just reassurance. A small but telling custom comes to mind. Some families believed leaving tools scattered overnight invited bad luck or injury. Whether superstition or common sense, the habit stuck. Tools resting where they belonged helped everyone rest too. The firelight catches briefly on metal as items are moved, then the reflections disappear. With fewer objects near the hearth, the space opens. The room feels calmer, less crowded, even though no one has left. You sense how this signals a deeper shift. The evening is no longer about doing, it is about allowing. The day's concerns are folded away alongside the tools, not erased but contained. People stretch more freely now. Someone leans back fully for the first time. Another rubs their hands together, warming skin that no longer needs to grip anything. The body understands the cue even if the mind has not named it. Some period's accounts describe a clear distinction between tools meant for night use and those reserved strictly for daylight. The separation was not rigid everywhere, but the idea of protecting night from heavy labour was widely understood. You feel that protection settle in. The room feels lighter, less purposeful in the best way. There is no task waiting to be picked up again unless someone chooses it. The fire becomes the only active thing left. Everything else rests. Even animals seem to sense the change, shifting slightly, then growing still again. A chair scrapes softly as someone adjusts their position. The sound feels different now, no longer competing with work noises. It stands alone, then fades. You notice how conversation thins further. Words feel unnecessary. The tools have been put away. What remains does not need commentary. This moment carries quiet satisfaction, the sense of having done enough. Not everything, but enough for one day. That feeling settles deeper than pride. It feels like permission. You realize how rare that permission can be. Daylight demands continuation. Night allows pause. The simple act of setting tools aside marks that boundary clearly. The fire crackles gently as if acknowledging the shift. Shadows deepen. The room grows softer. Someone yawns without covering their mouth, unbothered. Another closes their eyes briefly, then opens them again, not ready to move on just yet. The evening has crossed another threshold. There is no return to productivity now, only rest in whatever form it arrives. As the hearth continues its steady glow, and the last tool rests quietly in its place, the room settles fully into night mode, holding the sense of completion gently, and making space for the slower, quieter moments still ahead. You realize how learning happens here without anyone setting out to teach. No books are opened, no lessons announced. Knowledge moves quietly, passing from one person to another through listening, watching and remembering. Evening creates the conditions for this kind of learning simply by slowing everything down. Someone tells a story that includes a detail about planting or weather or a mistake made long ago. A child listens without appearing to. Later they repeat the detail almost exactly, surprising everyone. The learning has already taken root. No one needed to point it out. In homes like this, information travelled through repetition rather than instruction. Skills are absorbed by proximity. You learned when you were allowed to stay near adults long enough to hear how they talked about things that mattered. Evening made that possible. You notice how questions surface now. Not the urgent kind asked during work, but quieter ones. Why something is done a certain way? What happens if it is not? These questions drift into the room and wait patiently for an answer. Sometimes they receive one, sometimes they do not, and that's acceptable too. A small, easily overlooked practice comes to mind. Some families believe that explaining too much spoiled learning. Children were expected to piece things together slowly through observation. Evening conversations offered clues rather than conclusions. You feel how this approach shapes attention. Listening becomes active. You do not wait to be told everything. You notice patterns, you remember tone, you connect details over time. Someone demonstrates a knot absent-mindedly while talking about something else. The motion is not meant as a lesson, but it is. A pair of eyes follows the hands closely. The knowledge transfers in silence. Accounts of household life often describe children learning trades and domestic skills years before formal apprenticeships began. Evening exposure mattered. It allowed curiosity to grow without pressure or evaluation. You sense how this environment makes learning feel safe. There are no tests here, no wrong answers that must be corrected immediately. Mistakes can wait. Understanding arrives gradually. An adult answers a question with a story instead of a rule. The story does not explain everything, but it leaves an impression. You remember stories longer than instructions. Everyone here seems to know that instinctively. The firelight contributes in its own way. Dimness reduces distraction. Without bright light or external noise, attention sharpens naturally. Listening becomes easier. Memory holds on longer. Some interpretations suggest that this informal transmission of knowledge reinforced tradition more than innovation. Others note that it also allowed flexibility since stories could shift slightly with each telling. Sitting here, you feel how both happen at once. Continuity and change share the same space. You notice how learning is woven into belonging. Being allowed to listen is a sign of trust. Being addressed directly is a sign of growing responsibility. Evening marks these transitions subtly without ceremony. A child repeats a phrase they heard earlier, testing it out. Adults smile but do not comment. The phrase will either stick or fade. There is no rush. You sense how this kind of learning shapes confidence. Knowledge gained this way feels earned, not assigned. It lives in the body as much as the mind. The room grows quieter again as the exchange ends. No one says the lesson is over. It simply dissolves back into the evening. You realise that much of what endures from this world survives because of nights like this. Skills, values, habits, stories, all passed along not in daylight's urgency, but in the firelit calm that allows attention to settle. As the hearth glows steadily and the room rests in shared quiet, learning continues invisibly carried forward by memory and repetition, ready to surface again when the next evening invites it. Sleepiness does not arrive all at once. It moves through the room unevenly like a tide that reaches some shores before others. You notice it first in posture. A head tilts back slightly. A spine that had been holding itself upright finally gives in. Someone blinks longer than necessary, eyes lingering closed before reopening. The fire has not changed, but bodies have. The warmth that once energized now soothes. Muscles that carried the day grow heavy. Breathing deepens without instruction. Fatigue here is not fought, it is acknowledged quietly. In homes like this, tiredness was read carefully. There was no fixed hour when everyone was expected to sleep. Instead, people learned to recognize their own limits and those of others. Evening taught this skill through repetition night after night. You see how different people respond. One person grows talkative when drowsy words drifting and looping. Another becomes quiet, retreating inward. A third keeps working their hands slowly, as if motion helps delay rest just a little longer. A small domestic habit surfaces naturally. Some families believed that pushing past tiredness invited mistakes or bad dreams. When eyes grew heavy, it was taken as a signal rather than a weakness. The night knew what it was doing. You notice how yawns spread gently, not contagious in a sudden way, but persuasive over time. One yawn invites another. The room accepts this progression without comment. The firelight grows softer, or perhaps your eyes are simply adjusting. Shadows blur more deeply now, details matter less. The room becomes shapes and warmth rather than objects. Some people shift closer to one another as they grow tired. The need for warmth increases slightly as the body relaxes. Others lean away, seeking space to stretch out before sleep. The room accommodates both impulses easily. You feel how conversation thins further. Words take more effort to shape. Thoughts wander before reaching the tongue. Silence becomes the easier option, and so it stays longer. A child stirs half awake, murmuring something that makes sense only to them. An adult responds softly, not asking for clarity. Understanding matters less than reassurance. Accounts of household life often describe how evenings ended not with a clear break, but with a gradual unravelling. People drifted away from the hearth one by one, guided by tiredness rather than instruction. You feel that drift beginning now. Someone rubs their eyes and exhales a sound that carries both relief and readiness. Another stretches arms, overhead joints cracking softly. These are not signs of impatience, they are acknowledgements. You sense how tiredness here feels earned. The day was full, the evening has been full too in a quieter way. Sleep does not feel like escape, it feels like continuation. The fire crackles low and steady, no longer demanding attention. It has done its work. The room does not need brightness anymore. A lesser mentioned detail comes to mind. In some homes, people deliberately stayed awake just long enough to feel truly tired before sleeping, believing it led to deeper rest. Whether or not that was true, the practice reveals how closely people listen to their bodies. You listen now. Your own breathing has slowed. Your weight settles more fully into whatever supports you. The floor, the bench, the wall, everything feels more forgiving. Someone quietly gathers a blanket or shifts a cushion into place. The preparation is minimal. Sleep does not require ceremony. The room feels heavier with stillness but not tense. It is the weight of rest approaching like fog settling over a field. You notice how the firelight reflects dimly in half-closed eyes. Faces look softer, less defined. The day's expressions have been set aside. As minutes pass, the uneven arrival of sleepiness evens out. More bodies surrender to it. The room hums with a shared readiness. No one announces bedtime, no bell rings. The night simply takes hold where it finds openness. And as tiredness spreads fully through the room, the evening leans gently toward its next phase, carrying everyone closer to sleep without urgency, guided by warmth habit and the quiet agreement that enough has been done for one day. Even as sleepiness spreads, the fire is never fully trusted. Someone remains aware of it even now. You notice a quiet glance toward the hearth, a brief shift of posture that keeps one eye open to sparks and embers. Comfort here is paired with vigilance. The two have learned to coexist. The fire has changed character again. Flames are lower, steadier, more thoughtful. Heat radiates without drama. This is the stage meant to last, not impress. It carries the night forward safely if treated with care. In homes like this, tending the hearth was a shared responsibility that did not disappear with fatigue. One person might take the role by habit, another by circumstance. No one announces the duty. It is understood. You watch as someone nudges a log inward, careful not to stir sparks. Another adjusts ash with the edge of a tool, creating a bed that will hold heat without flaring. These movements are precise and practiced, even when hands are tired. A quietly revealing custom comes to mind. Some households deliberately banked the fire at night, covering embers with ash so warmth would survive until morning. The practice required attention and timing. Too much ash smothered the fire. Too little risked flames leaping back to life. You feel the concentration that this demands. It cuts through drowsiness, briefly sharpening focus. The task is done carefully, then released. Once finished, the mind can settle again. The room responds immediately. Light dims another notch. Shadows deepen. The fire's voice softens from crackle to murmur. The hearth becomes less of a presence and more of a background companion. You notice how this changes the emotional tone. With danger-reduced, rest feels safer. Bodies relax further. Someone shifts position, more fully trusting the quiet. There is a respect in how the fire is treated now, not fear but awareness. Fire has served the household all day and evening. Night asks it to behave differently and people respond accordingly. Some period accounts mention nighttime fires as one of the greatest household risks, particularly in wooden structures. Others describe the reassurance of waking to warm embers. Both realities lived side by side, balanced by careful habit. You sense how routine becomes protection. Doing the same things each night reduces error. Muscle memory carries responsibility when the mind is tired. A child's blanket is pulled higher. An animal shifts, sensing the change in heat. The room adjusts as one organism responding to the fire's quieter state. The hearth no longer draws eyes the way it did earlier. Attention drifts inward now. The fire does not need watching constantly, only occasionally. Trust has been earned. You feel how this shared vigilance strengthens connection. Everyone depends on the same flame. Everyone benefits from its restraint. The fire belongs to the household, not to any one person. As the embers settle, the room grows darker but not colder. Warmth lingers, held in walls, bodies and habit. The night feels stable. Someone takes one last look at the hearth, then turns away satisfied. The fire will hold until morning. You sense how this moment marks another threshold. The evening has crossed fully into night. What remains is rest. The room breathes slower now. Movements are minimal. The hearth glows quietly, doing its final work without asking attention. And as the fire rests under its blanket of ash, the household rests with it, trusting that care and routine have done enough, that the night can now be allowed to unfold in peace. You notice how privacy exists here without walls. The room is shared bodies, close yet thoughts remain personal. Evening creates this belongingness naturally. No one expects full transparency. Silence is respected as much as speech. People turn inwards now, even while remaining present. Eyes lower. Gazes rest on the fire or drift unfocused. Someone stares into shadow, not watching anything in particular. Another leans back, arms folded loosely, mind clearly elsewhere. Being together does not require engagement anymore. In homes like this, private space was rarely physical, it was behavioral. You learned how to signal when you wished not to be disturbed. A certain stillness, a closed posture, a quiet breath that said not now. Others learn to read these cues without asking. You feel how carefully this is handled. No one intrudes with questions, no one demands attention. Respect is expressed through restraint rather than words. A small domestic nuance comes to mind. Some people deliberately chose seats farther from the fire late in the evening, not for comfort but for solitude. Shadow offered cover. Dimness created a boundary that daylight never allowed. You notice how conversation fragments into pairs or even single thoughts. Few words exchanged quietly, a nod, then nothing. The room supports these smaller islands of experience without tension. There is comfort in knowing you can be alone without leaving. The hearth holds the group, but it does not press. This shared solitude feels different from isolation. It is chosen, not imposed. Some recollections from the period suggest that these moments were deeply valued, especially in crowded households. Others imply that constant proximity could feel overwhelming. Sitting here, you sense how evening mediates between the two. It gives distance without separation. You feel your own thoughts slow and deepen. They wander without urgency. A memory surfaces, then dissolves. A plan forms vaguely, then fades. Nothing demands resolution. The firelight helps. It softens the room enough that expressions blur. No one can easily read your face. You're allowed to feel without explanation. Someone shifts slightly, adjusting the set posture for comfort. The movement is quiet, careful not to intrude. Even sound respects privacy now. You realize how rare this kind of shared inwardness can be. Daytime insists on interaction. Night allows retreat. The hearth makes that retreat safe. An animal sighs in its sleep. The sound anchors the room gently, reminding everyone that rest is acceptable. You do not need to perform awareness anymore. The walls feel closer now, not confining but protective. The outside world has receded fully. What matters exists within this circle of low light and settled breath. A person near you closes their eyes without fully sleeping. Their presence remains, but their attention has turned inward. The room accepts this easily. You sense how these quiet boundaries prevent friction. Everyone gets a little space to be themselves without scrutiny. Evening teaches this by repetition, not instruction. The fire glows faintly enough to keep the room visible, not enough to expose it. Shadows do the rest of the work. As minutes pass, the feeling of privacy deepens. The room becomes a collection of quiet inner worlds held together by warmth and habit. You feel safe letting your own thoughts drift freely now. Nothing needs to be shared. Nothing needs to be held back. You are simply allowed to be. And in this shared but private stillness, the night prepares the room for its final transitions, carrying everyone gently toward rest without breaking the calm that has been so carefully built. You feel the emotional weight of the day finally begin to loosen. It does not fall away all at once. It thins gently like mist lifting from a field after sunset. What pressed hard early now feels manageable, smaller, held at a distance by warmth and quiet. Evenings by the hearth offered something rare in daily life, a chance to recover emotionally without needing to explain why. No one asks how you're doing in a formal way. They can see it in how you sit, how you breathe, how much you speak or do not speak at all. The room becomes a place where feelings are allowed to exist without resolution. Frustration from a failed task, worry about tomorrow's weather, grief that has no sharp edges left, only a dull ache. These things surface softly, then settle back down, change simply by being acknowledged. You notice how comfort is offered without language. A blanket shifted closer, a cup nudged within reach, someone choosing to park beside you rather than across the room. These gestures carry understanding without inviting conversation. In households like this, emotional repair was rarely explicit. There were no long discussions about stresses or mental health. Instead, care showed itself through presence, through shared silence, through routines that reassured without promising answers. A small but telling detail drifts into your awareness. Some people found themselves more willing to cry at night, not loudly but quietly near the fire. The low light hid expressions. The crackle of embers covered small sounds. Tears could fall without drawing attention. You feel how the hearth supports this. Firelight does not judge. It flickers whether you are steady or unraveling. Its constancy offers something solid to lean against when feelings feel unsteady. The body responds first. Shoulders release tension they have been holding since morning. Hands unclench. Breathing deepens. Only then do thoughts begin to soften. Evening works from the outside in. You sense how the emotional repair here is not about fixing problems. It is about making them lighter to carry. The day may return unchanged tomorrow, but tonight has offered relief. Someone speaks quietly about a difficulty they faced earlier. The words are not dramatic, the telling is brief, others listen without interrupting, without rushing to advise. When the speaker finishes, nothing follows immediately. The pause itself feels supportive. This restraint matters. Advice is saved for daylight. Night is for listening. Being heard without being corrected feels like relief in itself. Some recollections from the time suggest that evenings helped families maintain resilience across long stretches of hardship. Others hint that unspoken tensions could also linger in these quiet hours. Sitting here, you feel how both realities can coexist. Healing does not erase strain, it eases it. The fire dips and glows, again steady and patient. It becomes something to focus on when emotions threaten to swell. Watching flame rise and fall gives the mind a rhythm to follow. You notice how often people sigh now. Not the frustrated kind, but the releasing kind. Air leaves the lungs slowly, deliberately. Each sigh carries something out with it. The room feels gentler after this. Not happier exactly, but calmer. Emotions settle into a softer arrangement, less sharp, more manageable. You realize that this kind of repair leaves no visible mark, there is no proof it happened. Yet it shapes what comes next. People wake the next morning steadier because of these unspoken evenings. As the fire continues its quiet work and the room holds this softened state, you feel the day finally loosen its grip. What could not be fixed has been held. What could not be solved has been shared. The night moves forward carrying this quiet mending with it, preparing everyone for rest with the sense that for now, things are held well enough. Thoughts begin to tilt toward tomorrow without urgency. Not planning in any formal sense, just a gentle awareness of what waits beyond sleep. Someone mentions the weather expected in the morning. Another nods, already adjusting expectations. These are not strategies, they're acknowledgements. Evenings like this make space for anticipation without pressure. The day's work is done, the next day exists, but it has not arrived yet. The mind can approach it carefully from a distance. You notice how preparation slips into the room quietly. Shoes are turned the right way, placed where feet will find them easily at first light. A coat is hung closer to the hearth, so it will be warmer in the morning. These actions are small, but they ease the future. In homes like this, readiness mattered. Mornings arrive quickly and often demanded immediate effort. Anything that could be done the night before was a kindness to the body yet to wake. You feel the comfort in that kindness now. Tomorrow is acknowledged, not dreaded. It feels reachable, not overwhelming. A subtle habit comes to mind. Some families believe that speaking plans aloud at night made them feel heavier, as if naming tomorrow, too, clearly robbed the present of rest. Instead, preparation stayed quiet. Action spoke where words did not. You notice how conversation reflects this. People reference tomorrow indirectly if it stays dry. When the light comes back, phrases float by without detail. Everyone understands what they mean. The fire glows low and steady, encouraging this forward glance without pulling attention too far. It keeps the room grounded in, now even as minds drift slightly ahead. You feel how this balance prevents worry from spiraling. Thinking about tomorrow in small pieces keeps it manageable. The night does not allow catastrophizing. It softens edges before they can sharpen. Someone pauses, then adjusts a small thing that they had nearly forgotten. A tool moved closer to the door, a container set where it will be needed. The motion is brief, almost subconscious. There is satisfaction in these gestures. They close loops. They reduce friction. They make the future feel less abrupt. Some people grow quieter during this phase, retreating inward. Others speak a bit more, voicing thoughts as if to set them down before sleep. Both responses feel natural here. You sense how the room supports this gentle orientation. No one interrupts, no one pushes. Tomorrow is allowed to hover without taking over. The fire pops softly, a reminder of the present moment. The sound anchors you again. Whatever comes next can wait until morning. You notice how this forward thinking remains practical rather than emotional. Big hopes and fears have already been set aside earlier in the evening. What remains are simple considerations: weather, work, movement. This simplicity feels deliberate. The night knows its limits, it does not carry everything. Someone stretches, then settles again, satisfied that enough has been done. Another glances towards the door, then back to the fire. The future is acknowledged, then released. You realize how this practice builds resilience over time. By meeting tomorrow briefly and calmly each night, it loses some of its power to overwhelm. Familiarity breeds steadiness. The room grows quieter again as thoughts finish their short journey ahead. Preparation ends where rest begins. The fire continues to glow, holding the present firmly while letting the future remain just out of reach. The balance feels right. As the evening moves deeper into night, tomorrow fades back into abstraction. What matters now is warmth, stillness, and the slow settling of bodies and minds into rest. And with that, the household lets the future wait where it belongs, beyond sleep, trusting that the morning will arrive when it is ready. The sounds outside grow clearer as the room inside grows quieter. With voices mostly gone and the fire banked low, your attention drifts outward. Night makes its own announcements, and you begin to hear them one by one. Crickets carry the rhythm first steady and patient, their chorus rising and falling in waves. Somewhere farther off, an owl calls the sound hollow and deliberate. It feels less like a call and more like a marker, a reminder that the world beyond the walls is awake in a different way now. In places like this, people learned the language of night by listening. Without constant indoor noise, every sound mattered. You could tell the season by insects alone. You could tell the weather by how far sound travelled. Night taught awareness whether you wanted it to or not. You notice how the room responds to these sounds. No one startles, no one comments. These noises are expected, familiar enough to be comforting. They confirm that things are normal. The night is behaving as it should. Wind moves through leaves or tall grass, creating a soft, uneven whisper. The sound presses gently against the walls, then recedes. It feels like the outside world breathing. A small but revealing habit comes to mind. Some people judged the hour not by the fire, but by which night's sounds were present. When insects quieted and birds began to stir again, morning was close. Until then, night belonged fully to itself. You feel how these sounds shape mood. They widen the world without pulling you into it. You are aware of distance without needing to cross it. The hearth remains the centre, but the night stretches outward, layered and alive. Inside the house answers with its own quiet language. A beam settles. Wood contracts slightly as heat fades. These sounds are subtle but known. You recognise which ones matter and which do not. Someone shifts position, then stills again. The movement barely registers against the outside chorus. The balance feels right. Inside and outside coexist without conflict. There is comfort in knowing the world continues even as you rest. The night does not pause because you are tired. It carries on steady and indifferent, and that steadiness feels reassuring rather than threatening. Some people believe that listening to night sounds helped guard against danger. Others simply found them soothing. Sitting here, you feel how both could be true. Awareness and calm are not opposites. The fire emits a final soft pop, then settles fully. Its sound blends into the background, now just another presence among many. You notice how darkness sharpens hearing. Sounds feel closer, more detailed. You pick out individual notes in the chorus that earlier would have blurred together. A distant animal moves unseen. The sound is brief, then gone. No one reacts. The night has always moved like this. You feel the walls doing their quiet work, holding warmth and sound inside. They are not barriers so much as filters, letting just enough through to remind you of the world beyond. The room feels anchored by these layers of sound. Silence inside is never complete. It is supported by life outside, a gentle reminder that rest happens within a living environment. As minutes pass, the outside chorus thins slightly. Some insects fall quiet. Others continue. The pattern shifts gradually unnoticed unless you're listening closely. You realize how these sounds guide the final descent into sleep. They occupy the mind lightly, giving it something to rest against as thoughts loosen further. The hearth no longer needs attention. The room no longer needs conversation. The night has taken over its role, offering a steady, unchanging backdrop. As the outside world murmurs on and the inside settles into stillness, you feel the evening reaching its last calm plateau. The house, the fire, the night sounds all align, preparing the space for the final transition into rest. The night continues its quiet work beyond the walls, and you held safely inside are free to let go, carried gently by sound and shadow towards sleep. Letting the fire fade is never careless. It is deliberate, almost thoughtful. You notice how the last strong glow is allowed to soften rather than disappear. No one rushes this part. The hearth has carried the household through the evening, and it deserves a gentle closing. Someone adjusts the embers one final time, spreading them just enough that heat lingers without flame. Ash is drawn carefully over the brightest spots. The motion is slow practice, done more by feel than sight. This is not about extinguishing. It is about settling. You feel how the room responds immediately. Light drops another shade. Shadows thicken. The fire's voice quiets to a low whisper. The change is subtle but unmistakable. Night has been fully invited in. In homes like this, fire was rarely put out completely unless necessary. Embers held promise. They meant warmth in the morning, less work to begin the day. Letting the hearth sleep mirrored what everyone else in the room was preparing to do. You notice how bodies shift in response. People lean back more fully now, eyes close longer between blinks. The last threads of alertness loosen. The room feels wrapped rather than lit. A small, easily missed practice comes to mind. Some families left a specific tool near the hearth overnight, not for use, but as reassurance. Knowing it was there mattered more than touching it. It was a quiet acknowledgement that fire was still present, still watched, even as attention drifted. The air cools slightly as flames retreat, but not enough to disturb comfort. Warmth remains stored in walls, floors, bodies. The fire has already done most of its work. You notice how silence changes when the fire dims. Earlier silence felt open and reflective. Now it feels heavy and complete. Sounds stand out more sharply against it than dissolve again. Someone exhales deeply, the sound slow and content. Another shift settling into a position meant to last. No one speaks. Words would feel out of place now. The hearth no longer commands the room. It recedes into partnership with darkness. Together they hold the space steady. Some people believed that watching the last glow of a fire carried meaning, that it marked the true end of the day. Others treated it simply as habit. Sitting here, you feel how meaning and habit blend easily. Repetition gives weight to small moments. The room feels smaller now, but not confined. The dimness draws attention inward. Thoughts grow quieter. Images blur at the edges. The mind prepares to drift. You sense how this moment signals safety. A well-settled fire means the night can be trusted. Rest does not feel risky, it feels earned. Animals nearby shift once more, then still completely. Their breathing deepens. The room mirrors them, settling into the same rhythm. The fire glows faintly beneath its ash, a quiet promise rather than a display. It will wait. Morning will find it again. You feel finality of this stage without drama. Nothing needs to happen next. The evening has reached its natural close. As the hearth rests and darkness takes its place fully, the room holds its warmth carefully. Everything that needed doing has been done. Everything that needed saying has already been said. The night settles around you like a familiar weight. The fire sleeps, the house listens, and with the last glow tucked safely away, the path toward rest opens wide and easy, inviting everyone to follow without resistance. Sleep arrives without ceremony. There is no clear handoff, no moment when evening declares itself finished. Instead, bodies begin to move in small, purposeful ways, guided by habit more than thought. Someone stands quietly and crosses the room. Another shifts to make space. The shared evening thins not abruptly but gently. Sleeping arrangements here are practical and flexible. Beds, pallets, benches and floors all serve the same purpose. Comfort comes less from softness than from familiarity. You sense how bodies know where they belong, even in low light. Feet find the right corner. Hands reach for blankets already placed where they will be needed. In households like this, sleep was rarely solitary. People rested within reach of one another, close enough to hear breathing, close enough to feel warmth. Privacy took a different shape at night, built from trust rather than distance. You notice how quiet communication guides the process. A nod, a hand gesture, a pause to let someone pass. No one speaks unless necessary. Words would feel too sharp now. A small but revealing habit comes to mind. Some people believe that speaking too much before sleep unsettled the mind. Silence was thought to help thoughts loosen their grip. Whether belief or experience, the practice feels right in this moment. The fire's glow is barely visible now, just enough to outline shapes. Darkness fills the rest, soft and complete. The room no longer feels like a place of gathering. It feels like a place of holding. You lie down or lean back, letting your weight settle fully. The surface beneath you may be firm, but your body adjusts quickly. Fatigue smooths edges. What might have felt uncomfortable earlier now feels adequate, even comforting. Breathing becomes the loudest sound inside the room. Slow, deep, uneven at first, then gradually synchronizing. The rhythm is not perfect, but it is shared. An animal shifts closer, curling into warmth. The movement is brief, then stillness returns. The presence feels grounding, not distracting. You notice how thoughts change as sleep approaches. They lose structure. Images drift without needing explanation. Memories blur into sensations. The mind stops insisting on clarity. Some recollections from the period suggest that people often fell asleep quickly after lying down, bodies already worn by the day. Others mention long moments of quiet wakefulness. Both experiences likely lived side by side, shaped by weather, health and worry. You feel yourself drifting in and out, not fully asleep, not fully awake. The room remains present but distant. Sounds soften. Even the outside world seems farther away now. Someone nearby sighs and settles. The sound feels final, like punctuation. The night accepts it. There is no fear in this closeness. Familiar breathing reassures, shared space feels protective, the house holds everyone together. You sense how the hearth, even dimmed, still anchors the room. Its warmth lingers, felt more than seen. It is enough. As minutes pass, awareness thins. The edges of the room fade. The sense of self loosens gently. Sleep does not rush you, waits until you are ready. And as the household settles fully into rest, the shared evening dissolves into shared sleep, carrying the warmth of fire and presence into dreams, leaving the night quiet, steady and complete. You are not fully aware of the moment when the room becomes still. It happens gradually, like the last ripple fading from water after something has passed through. Breathing deepens everywhere. Movement disappears. Even the house seems to settle into itself, wood quieting as warmth evens out. The night has claimed the space now, not forcefully, patiently. What remains of the fire is hidden under ash, a quiet presence rather than a source of light. Warmth lingers where it is needed, most held in body's walls and memory. You sense how the evening has left a trace behind. Not something you can point to, but something you feel, a softness, a steadiness, the sense of having been held in company without being demanded of. In households like this, mornings would arrive soon enough, bringing noise, effort and daylight back into the room. But this moment suspended between fire and sleep carried its own meaning. It reminded people that rest was not wasted time, it was preparation. You notice how the warmth of the hearth follows you inward. Even with eyes closed, you can feel where it was. The mind remembers the glow, the rhythm, the sound. These impressions drift with you as consciousness loosens its grip. A small, almost forgotten detail surfaces. Some people believe that falling asleep near the hearth helped carry calm into dreams. Whether belief or coincidence, the idea itself suggests how deeply the fire shaped emotional life. The room no longer needs watching. Trust has replaced vigilance. The fire will hold, the house will stand, the night will pass as it always does. You breathe slowly now, uncounted, unmeasured. The body knows what to do. Muscles soften. Thoughts slide away before they can form fully. Outside, the world continues, but it no longer presses in. Sounds blur, distance stretches. The inside of the house becomes its own small universe, complete and sufficient. You feel the comfort of repetition. This night has happened before in countless variations, and it will happen again. The pattern itself is reassuring. It tells you that your rest is expected, that it belongs here. As sleep deepens, the memory of the hearth remains, not as image, but as feeling. Warmth, safety, shared quiet. These are the things the evening leaves behind. Your awareness thins to a narrow thread, then loosens entirely. The room fades, the night holds. Wind down, now the pace slows even further. Nothing is waiting, nothing needs attention. The day has ended cleanly and the night has accepted everything without question. You are allowed to rest here, wrapped in the memory of warmth and low firelight. Imagine the last glow beneath the ash, steady and calm, waiting patiently for morning. Imagine the house breathing quietly around you, familiar and secure. The walls know this night. They have held many like it. Let your thoughts drift without direction. There is no need to follow them. They can come and go as they please, like shadows moving across the ceiling. Each breath carries you a little deeper into rest. You are safe. You are warm. The hearth has done its work and now it rests with you. The world beyond can wait. Sleep comes easily now, settling gently like a hand placed lightly on your shoulder. Sweet dreams.